Open. Just like to welcome you, fellow council senior staff. Seeing the proceedings are now live streamed, I'm obligated to read out the following message to you all. This meeting is recorded and live streamed for public viewing via the internet in accordance with Council's Code of Meeting Practice, with the recording stored and made available to the public for the later viewing. The recording is subject to copyright. Members of the public attending or speaking at this meeting will be recorded and publicly broadcast. By attending this meeting, you voluntarily consent to your attendance and participation being recorded. Any part of the meeting that is held in closed session will not be live streamed. Council requests that everyone present is respectful and uses appropriate language. Council does not accept liability for any defamatory, discriminatory or offensive comments that are made during the course of the meeting. Please ensure that all electronic devices, including mobile phones, are switched to silent, and under the Code of Meeting Practice, public recordings of this meeting is prohibited without prior authorisation by Council. And I'll ask the Acknowledgement of Country to be read by Councillor Ian Scandrick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today.
And very relevant, seeing it is NAIDOC week and we are halfway through just about. The chaplain to the Nashos and...
the veterinary veterans and the truckies.
Who I see on quite a regular basis. Quite often I'll ask Chaplain John Wheeler to open the meeting with prayer.
Well, to start with, I'm going to read from chapter 13 of Romans. It says, "Obey the government, for God is the one who puts it there. There is no government anywhere that God has not placed in power." So these who refuse to obey the law of the land are refusing to obey God, and to punishment will follow. You can go on then and read from there about paying taxes and so forth, which means that if we don't pay our taxes, the staff here won't get paid. And so there you are. But I won't go any more than that. But I'm going to pray now for the Mayor to start with, that he'll make the right decisions, and also for the staff and so forth. Dear Lord Jesus, we pray that you'd be with the Mayor today, and also for the other councillors who have got some problems to sort out. We pray too for the staff here that are backing them up with information and so forth, and especially the business manager too, Lord, that you'd look after her today. Pray for the press too, Lord, that they'll have a time of doing the reporting of this meeting, and help them, Lord Jesus, in that regard. I'm looking at the gallery here, Lord Jesus, with all the people that have got problems today. They've come here today, Lord, to get their problems sorted out. And we pray especially, Lord, for them, and especially the group here, Lord, that I can see they're really wanting to get their problems sorted out. And there are other people too, Lord, that need your help. We ask, Lord Jesus, now for these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain John. Okay, so we move on to apologies, and just to remind councillors, as we are live streaming, when you are speaking, please make sure you speak into the microphones. Adoption of previous minutes. Move Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Whipper. Any discussion on the correctness of the minutes? Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, in the minutes it states quite clearly on the
What
matter...
page?
I'm just getting to that. Just while I find that, I'll speak to it anyway. The minutes show quite clearly the decision made on a property on 144 Mount Broughton Road, where which happens to be my wife and my...
No, the correctness of the minutes, please.
I'm about to say that. And I take you to the
Page
minutes.
number, please. Page number.
Just bear with me. But anyway, the motion that was dealt with...
Page number, please,
Page
Councillor.
31, minutes, Wednesday the 12th of June. It says quite clearly,
The-
right, there's 2 points there that it was refused on, Mr Mayor.
Councillor,
And the minutes
Councillor,
that are here today
Councillor, will you resume your seat?
are incorrect.
Will you resume your seat, please?
Why?
Because I am asking you to.
Well, you're asking about the correctness of the minutes.
Because I am asking you resume your seat.
Again, I'm...
Because what
challenge-
page number, Councillor Scandrett?
It's the minutes arising from the previous meeting, which are in
No,
this.
we are doing the minutes of the 26th of June.
Yes, the report to council in the legal report of the minutes that you are dealing with states quite clearly the reasons for refusal on that property, the matter I was outside the room on. That's what I'm referring to, and I'm therefore...
What page number, Councillor
The legal report,
Scandrett?
page 34.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
No, thank you, Councillor Scandrett.
So,
If
within
you
that...
answer the question first, you wouldn't be embarrassing yourself.
I'm not embarrassed, Mr Mayor.
Now, where is the error in the page?
Well, the legal report...
No, where is the error, Councillor Scandrett?
Mr Mayor...
What line?
It's... In the legal
What
report...
line
You have to
is...
go to the agenda at the time, Mr Mayor.
No, Councillor Scandrett,
The
we
legal
are
report simply
dealing
was
with...
adopted. It says here...
Councillor Scandrett,
All right, let it be noted, Mr Mayor. Let it be noted.
no, let it be noted.
Let it be noted, Mr Mayor. I'm just pointing out there's an error.
Councillor Scandrett,
I'm trying to point out
there
there's
is...
an error.
No, you're not. You weren't referring to the minutes, you're referring to another item, and that is why I pulled you up. Anything else on the correctness of the minutes, then I put that. All in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. There's no business arising as such. Do we have declarations of interest? Councillor Turlin.
16.2, it's a notice of motion that Councillor Scandrett's put up. Depending if it's debated, I will leave it. If it's not debated, I won't leave the chamber. If it is debated, I'll leave the chamber.
Thank you. Any other other declarations of interest?
Yes,
I
Mr
have
Mayor.
Councillor Scandrett.
There's a matter there to do with the Berrima Master Plan, which includes Renwick, which I have a...
What item number, please, Councillor
Mr
Scandrett?
Mayor. Sorry. Okay. It is the
10.4.
10.4. That's quite correct. Page 168. No, that's not it. Sorry, that's the.
Oh, that's right.
It's the. Control plan amendments on page 210, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm declaring an interest as my family have an interest in a property in Renwick, which I think is less than significant in this matter, and I'll take guidance from the staff on that.
That's up to you, councillor Scandrett. You know the rules.
Is it significant or not?
I have no idea what your
Well, I
interest in
haven't-
any
It's the same-
property in Renwick is. Councillor,
It's the
you
same
make that
interest. I
decision
declared
yourself.
Two meetings ago, Madam GM.
Well, that's councillor Scandrett. Are you
Okay,
doing this on purpose,
Not at all, Mr Mayor. And
or
incidentally...
is it just to get public attention?
Oh, Mr Mayor, no.
Will you please resume your seat?
I've declared it.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? They're not. Councillor, Mr Pepping.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a declaration of interest in item 8.1, Seniors Living Development 2 Orchard Street, Colovale. It's significant non-pecuniary as I have relatives that live in the proximity of that development, and I will leave the chamber.
Thank you, Mr Pepping, and I shall declare a significant interest in relation to 1.4 Heritage Assessment of Aiken Road. I am on the JRPP committee as council's representative, and I will be then asking Councillor Turlin to take the chair. All right, we now move on to the business items, and the first one is mayoral minute. And I'm not going to read it. We are live streaming, but for me to read this out, you'll probably all suffer from insomnia before I finish. But basically it is to, and if I'm looking for a mover on that, or I'll move from the chair and seconded Councillor Markwart, that the attendance to the Australian local government that was by myself, the General Manager, and Councillor Graham Andrews was on the 16th of October to the 19th of October this year in Canberra at the National Convention Centre. There are 120 items on the business paper, and there were 800 delegates, which made the second biggest number of delegates in the conference history. And the most three important items in the number of 120 motions were state and federal funding allocations, waste, which is, believe it or not, just not a problem in Wingecarribee Shire, but right across the state from the Pilbara to the Daintree Forest. And of course, the major elephant in the room was climate change. So those issues, all motions save one, were endorsed by the conference, and we return back to Mossvale on Wednesday about 12 o'clock. So if there's any discussion, Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor.
No? Then I'll put the Councillor Markwart.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to briefly mention refer to the item climate change. Just for the people around the table in the room, I have been tempted to bring a motion on climate change to this chamber, but at this stage I've struggled with that because I don't see much real concrete benefit at this stage. So when and if I can see something additional that council can do in that area, I will probably bring climate change in some format to this chamber. I see it's recognised throughout the state as a major issue, and I think it's a growing concern. I certainly do believe it's an emergency, but I'll wait till I have some bright idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Markwart. Put the recommendation. All in favour? Those against? Carried. The second one is is quite a sad mayoral minute in relation to the condolences for the death of Max Powditch, who was a local member of the Exeter community for the last 25 years, I think. And again, I know Councillor McLaughlin wishes to say a few words, but I didn't get to know Max really until around about 2009, and Max Powditch contacted Council, and one of the greatest contributions that Max made to our community was his suggestion for Council to engage an independent funding company in an attempt to recover Council's losses in regard to the Lehman Brothers during the 2008 global financial crisis. Through his suggestion, which as Mayor I supported, along with the majority of councillors and with the General Manager, and with the commitment and dedication of the then Finance Manager, Mr Barry Paul, saw Council recover approximately 95% of its investment portfolio, and that the final distributions still haven't been realised. And why am I sitting on this? Because there was $11 million involved in the recovery. And we thought, as council, as the vast majority of the community did, that we had lost it. But Mr Paul proved otherwise. I will leave it there because I know Graham McLaughlin would like to speak. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank you very much for bringing this condolence motions to Council today. Look, I was at the service today. There was wonderful eulogies done about the life of Max Powditch by local people, by his friends. Max, in his working life, worked for Bankers Trust for probably 30 years or so. Rob Ferguson gave a eulogy today, spoke about the passion that Max had, and he was in the position to be able to advise us because he was an analyst and he loved that. He loved sport, he loved to run, he loved all sorts of things. But when he retired down here, Mr Mayor, he really threw himself into this community. I know Mr Lee, who's sitting here today, he went to school with one of Max's sons, and I think he can attest to what a fantastic send-off happened today for Max. But it was an uplifting send-off for Max. As you remember, Mr Mayor, that when Max came to council, he was passionate about all sorts of things. And one of the things he was passionate about down here was education. And he came to us, I think, in about 2010 with a whole group of people. He'd done all the analysis of really what we needed in this community, and it was a residential university. And he had all the facts and figures he put up there, and he said this could really do something for this community. He tried very hard to get that. Max was involved in so many things. Can I just mention just a couple of others that he was involved in? He was involved in Probus. He raised money for Rainbow, the Southern Highlands, Eva, if you suggested, Apex. He did so many things in, a mowing group in Exeter to encourage. But more than anything, Max was the sort of man that loved people, and he loved to hear their story. He was the sort of man that inspired people. It didn't matter who you are, everyone had a story. And Max was one of those people. If you spoke to Max, he'd be telling you, I've just met this, he's fantastic, or I've just read a book, it's fantastic. He was one of those people, I think we're all better, those people that knew Max, about what Max brought. I'm wearing my Wingecarribee Bushies top because Max started this about 17 years ago, and it was a running group. Started off as a running group. In later years, as Vince said, his knees wore out, and he said it became a walking group. And towards the end, Max was only starting to run, or less and less. But he was fond, very fond of statistics, and he loved to do park run. Kept all his statistics. He did over 100 run there. The hall today was absolutely packed. This was his dream. I met Max 12 years ago, and his dream for that heritage hall out there was to do something with it. And he lived long enough to see it. Thanks to you, Councillor, with some good designs. Thank you, Councillor Turner. But he loved doing things, not just for the school, but for people and for this community. This community has lost a great community person. As you've acknowledged in here, we put him up as a Citizen of the Year a few years ago. I sponsored him on that because this was the sort of man that Max was. He's going to be greatly lost. He had a great life. He lived to 82, almost 82, but he wasn't an old man. He still ran. When he was 75, he did a half Ironman. A half Ironman at 75, Mr Mayor. When he was 60, he ran 60 Ks. I mean, and raise money for all sorts of things. And as you pointed out in this, what he did for this council with the last GM, with raising money with Gordon Lewis, going out to help drought-stricken people. So I commend very much that you've done this for the community. I know it's not something we usually do, but because he was so influential in what he did for our community, he's going to be greatly lost. I've lost a friend, but I think we're all better people that have met Max, because Max was a very special person. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Turlett.
Yeah, look, knowing Max for a few years, not as long as you have, but over the years, I just wonder if would it be possible that we could plant a tree in the front of the garden here with Max's name underneath it?
Well, how about we take that on notice as just a
I just think
suggestion
that'd
from
be-
a mayoral
He
minute?
was in the Bush group, you know, he did lots for the council and the community. That sort of be a good
I
move.
think we'd be able to find an appropriate place. Maybe Exeter would be a good spot around the Exeter Hall. And in closing, in relation to this, his other contribution, we're all getting a little bit older, but back in when he was first involved, he came and saw the general manager back then, Jason Gordon, and started the University of the Third Age, the U3A, which was a outstanding success. Thank you very much. We've sent flowers and a card to the funeral today. Will I put that recommendation? Yeah, seconded by Councillor McLaughlin. Sorry, I thought that was recorded. Put that, all in favour? Against? Carried. We now go to public forum, and I do say that under the new Code of Meeting Practice there is no extension or allowance for people who go over either as a visitor item or public forum, and I won't allow it. It's not just, but we have been told you will not extend, okay? So don't blame me if you don't quite finish. Public forum, it's in relation to development control plans. Mr Barry Anstey, where are you, Mr Anstey? Will address council against this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I addressed council in November 2017 on this matter and put in a submission in relation to a number of things. And on correspondence I received from council, it seems that there was going to be a working stakeholders group. That appears not to have occurred. At least I wasn't involved in it. But the matter's come on the business paper today, and there's something there's two items within it that really concern me. On the last page of the section, there's a subdivision of existing land at Berrima, and I should point out that in 1971, as part of my honours degree in architecture, I did a thesis on Mortimer William Lewis, the colonial architect and former Surveyor General. The area that's involved, in fact the area that runs from basically the Catholic Church up to Australia Street, is a subdivision done in 1868. That subdivision, in my view, is probably the most significant subdivision in heritage terms in Australia, because it is a subdivision, if you look at it, that shows that there was a school with mews-style lots around it, there was a park with mews-style lots around it, and the lots vary in size across the subdivision. The only precedent, so it was an integration of a building design and a subdivision. The only thing that occurred in Australia since that is Walter Griffin's design for Canberra. So as much as it's laid dormant for many, many years, I note that council is looking to rezone it and allow amalgamations. You are seeking to destroy the most significant piece of history and subdivision and town planning in this country. and I think you should reconsider, at least in relation to that area, and get some advice as to what is the appropriate situation and research. I've got research which I'm happy to provide, because I did some further research about 10 years ago in relation to that. In relation to, following on from that, I mean, the Southern Highland Wines development was knocked back because of the fact that the landscape was a cultural heritage landscape. Here we've got the most significant subdivision produced in Australia in terms of its integration of building design and subdivision, and we're looking to destroy it. I just think it shouldn't be allowed, and you need to reconsider and understand what it's about. The second thing is, in terms of dual occupancies, in my submission back 18 months ago, I said that the restricting of development to a dual occupancy to 100 square metres was actually prohibiting development. That seems to have survived into this recommendation. It's a situation that just stops development. If you're only going, you can read it two ways. I accept that maybe one of them is 100 square metres, but maximum. But you could also read that the maximum dual occupancy is 100 square metres, which means 50 square metres each. It's incorrectly drafted. You haven't got an approval yet for your housing strategy. You haven't got your strategic plan approved yet by the Department of Planning. You're proposing proposals that are restricting development beyond or prohibiting development by their terms. You shouldn't be doing that at this point in time in terms of a DCP. You need to, dual occupancy in the economy we're currently in is a valid form of development and should be allowable. So they're the issues that I brought up in the submission, in written submission back in 2017, November. They're still relevant, but and I think are critical, but the situation about the properties at Berrima, it should be redeveloped, so it's allowed to be redeveloped in individual lots with a specific DCP, and create a development that replicates what was intended in 1868 in the Victorian style. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anstey. No, it's public forum. And as public forum, there are no questions from councillors. Second public forum is the item 11.4, Heritage Assessment of Aiken Road Barrel Group, Interim Heritage Order. Mr. Simon Miletto will address council on behalf of the applicant. Thank you. I understand that if, oh no, you're a public forum, you're right.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr Mayor and councillors. My name is Simon Militano. I'm the Head of Development for Lendlease Retirement Living, and I'd like to speak briefly on this property's report. By way of background, Lendlease has owned and operated the nearby Annesley Premium Retirement Village for over 10 years now. Annesley is home to almost 100 residents with an average age of 83 years, and the oldest person is 100 years, and amazingly, over 19 people are over 90 years of age, and many residents have lived there for greater than 15 years. Our villages provide a positive and rewarding choice for seniors, providing independence, security and social inclusion. Annesley includes a lifestyle centre, and around 220 members from the local community are able to access the gym, pool, cafe and related facilities. The one thing that this village misses is a continuum of care, co-located aged care facility to allow people to age in place, which is of particular importance to partners who may age in different stages and need to be in close proximity to their partner. The senior statistics are compelling. Australia's population over 65 years is set to double over the next 40 years. In this catchment area, over 70-year-olds will increase by over 35% in the next 10 years, or greater than 3.5% per annum, which is far greater than the average of the standard population, which is less than 2% per annum. Within this LGA itself, around 22% of residents are over 60 years, with an increase to 32% expected over the next 8 years. Our village residents have confirmed their future needs and expectations with us, and they overwhelmingly want to age in place, to stay close to their family, friends and loved ones, and a community they know and feel safe in. We are seeking to respond to these needs. I would like to acknowledge upfront that we have focused on our residents' needs during this process, where our consultations should have been earlier and more broad-ranging with the local community. In responding to the details of the Council report, I would like to respectfully note the following. Lendlease is willing to work with Council and will agree to hold discussions with Council to try and agree on a mutually acceptable outcome for any development on the sites which are currently subject to the IHO and which Lendlease has control of. Undertake further consultation with the local community in relation to the proposed development of the sites, and assist Council with ensuring it has sufficient information, including heritage input, to inform any proposed LEP amendment and scope it correctly. Lendlease has some concerns with the proposed resolutions and requests that the Council, if not abandon, then defer the item to enable the scope of the proposed LEP amendment to be refined, with, of course, the appropriate heritage input and assistance from Lendlease if required. Lendlease's concerns with the proposed resolutions are based on heritage advice received and includes the following. The proposed LEP amendment is flawed and is at least in part without basis because the 3 houses proposed to be listed as heritage items are attributed to Alf Stevens. However, there does not appear to be any evidence he designed these houses. The 3 houses proposed to be listed are very different in style and quality. The Council's report appears to indicate no internal inspections of the houses have been carried out, as there is no mention of the extensive external and internal alterations that have been made, especially to Barkfold at 39 to 41. No research or comparative analysis has been undertaken to verify the claims made in public submissions to the DA or to research Alf Stevens' contribution to Bowral or the region. No heritage assessment completed for other houses proposed to be in the conservation area. And for a conservation area, it is common practice to assume that more than 50% of the buildings in the area should contribute to an established character of the area. However, no rationale or explanation of what character the properties are contributing to is provided, and if landscaping is the key issue, then guidelines could be developed for the conservation and reinforcement of street front planting. The proposed LEP amendment is premature, as the heritage assessment in the Council's report does not appear to justify the proposed LEP amendment due to the above issues with Council's analysis. If Council were prepared to defer the item pending further research and investigations, Lendlease is willing to provide all necessary assurances to Council that it will not undertake any works on the sites that it controls until either an agreement is reached with Council or the current Land and Environment Court proceedings are otherwise resolved. Lendlease will, in the context...
Thank you. Sorry, I can't let the...
Okay. Thank you.
As I say, and I apologise, but that is the new running laws for, or the meeting code of practice. We now have, we move on to 8.1, which is Senior Housing Development 2 Orchard Street, Cola Vale on page 4. And we'll have an introduction first, and then the Mr. Carl Bashan will address Council against the motion, and Mr. Joshua Graham will be in support. So initially, I'll ask for a Council introduction. Mr. Wilton, through you, General Manager.
Through the Chair, the purpose of this report is considered Development Application 190837, which seeks development consent for the purpose of seniors living development at 2 Orchard Street, Cola Vale. The site is zoned R2, low density residential, under the Wingecarribee Local Environment Plan 2010, and occupies an area of about 1,001 square metres. The site's generally cleared, and the area is characterised by typically low-scale, single residential development in Orchard Street. The proposal seeks consent to construct 4 self-contained seniors housing units with a proposed 2-storey building element. The building is proposed to consist of an 11-degree pitched skid-in roof in 3 components, with materials ranging from custom ore, panels, face brick, fibre cement, and also timber. 2 of the 3 bedroom units are on the ground floor, with 2 of the 2 bedroom units on the first floor. The proposal also considers communal open space, 5 designated car spaces, and also removal of 1 tree on Council's road reserve for the purpose of access and egress to the property. The development is compliant in terms of development density controls in the order of 0.48 to 1, and also setbacks. However, there is a minor departure in terms of the height controls relating to this development of 8 metres, whereby the proposal demonstrates an overall height of 8.3 metres. That departure has been appropriately justified by a clause 4.6 variation. Councillors be aware that the Northern Villages Development Control Plan does not provide for controls for senior housing development, and therefore council staff have relied upon the controls in the seniors housing SEP for the assessment of this application. The proposal has been neighbour notified for a period of 14 days. 28 submissions and also a petition were received during the submission period. They detail matters relating to the surrounding appearance, density controls, DCP departures, parking, traffic, access, noise, privacy, overshadowing and built form. In response to those submissions received, the proponent has amended their plans, which addresses primarily the privacy concerns that have been raised by placement of louvers and also planter boxes on the northern side upper balconies. Other issues that have been raised in the submission period have been dealt with on pages 8 to 12 of the business paper report this evening. And the assessing officer's report concludes the proposal will provide a variety of housing choice in Coalvale area and has recommended approval subject to development conditions on this consent.
Thank you, Mr Wilton. Any questions to Mr Wilton? We'll do well, I was happy enough to take questions then the visitor item. So, thank you, Madam General Manager. Mr Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, through you, Madam GM, to Mr Wilton with regard. I did read the report, and I think one of the concerns coming loud and clear through this from the community is basically how it fits within our villages. And the question I put to you is, how do we come to the conclusion that this type of development is suitable, situated in a village of Coalvale?
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, seniors housing is permitted with consent in this zone. It is acknowledged that the building is of a 2-storey nature. One of the concerns that have been raised is that it's not in accordance with the character of that area. The DCP sets out the strategic approach in which development will be considered, and that does permit a 2-storey element on that site. In terms of the overall roof pitch, a number of those dwellings in that street do have the one in particular directly across the road does have the 2nd-storey element within the roof pitch. This site, or this development, is considering a skillion roof, if I could say it in that way, rather than a pitched roof, and it's just basically providing a variation of built form and also housing choice.
Thank you, Councillor Scandra.
Mr Mayor, could I ask how many 2-storey buildings are there in Coalvale approximately? And secondly, how many, this is 10 bedrooms, so how many bedrooms is the average household in Coalvale, which would probably be a seat of the pants comment?
Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, in terms of the 2nd-storey elements, there's about 3 or 4 in the actual village itself, I believe. In terms of bedrooms, look, the majority of the houses around there are probably 3 to 4 bedrooms. That's the best I can do at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Turlin.
So this development complies with all requirements of the DCP and the LEP at this point in time?
Through you, Madam General Manager, Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, as I drew upon previously, the development control plan doesn't relate to senior housing. However, the assessing officer has drawn upon the SEP relating to seniors housing. In relation to this matter, there's only one main departure that we've seen in terms of the actual overall building height of 8.3 metres. The controls relate to 8 metres, and that departure has been clearly justified within the actual application.
Thank you. There being no further questions, I'll ask Mr. Carl Bastian to come forward.
Good afternoon all. Of the 1,600 Colavale community members, 200 plus vigorously object to the DA in front of you and ask you to represent your community by refusing the application. When have you seen such a negative response from the community? We have found 40 plus issues with the application, the assessment and the subsequent business paper, yet only have 3 minutes to represent the concerns of the 200 plus. Therefore, I will speak to 6 major points. 1, the illegitimate use of the senior SEP for assessment, its conflict with the Northern Villages DCP and the crafty cherry picking of the SEP and the DCP to only support the DA is concerning. 2, the notification and mandatory re-exhibition notification due to the changes in the DA were illegitimate as per the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, for example, was not notified as an integrated development as it is a Water Management and Bushfire Acts in contradiction of Clause 89 of the EPNA Act. Also, Schedule 1, Division 3, provisions relating to public exhibition, Part 16, exclusion of Christmas New Year period for notification. This was notified during that period. This opens the door for a Class 4 appeal in the Land Environment Court by the community. Point 3, the assessment is riddled with the word urban, yet Colavale is anything but urban, and the current council character statements project will more than demonstrate that Colavale is not an urban area. Colavale is a small rural village, as defined in section A2.2.6 visual amenity of the Northern Villages DCP. The bulk and form of this DA is in no way consistent with the amenity of the area and our community. Point 4, the lack of the required supporting assessment reports, which have either not been conducted or have not been made available to council officers and or community for review, such as flooding, flood risk mapping, acoustics, traffic and fire egress, to name a few, as per the EPNA Clause 4.15 assessment for impacts. The Colavale community is genuinely concerned that this DA is in its current form will cost lives in the event of a natural disaster. 5, car spaces is non-compliant. It appears to be designed using the old standard. Under the new standard, there would only be 4 car spaces. Does not meet the SEP or the DCP. 6, the current DA's bulk and form is akin to a block of units / flats or residential flat buildings of a true Sydney urban area. This dwarfs anything in the community. The 2016 census lists that on average 2.9 people currently reside on a block in Colavale. This development crushes those numbers by providing 10 bedrooms, the potential for 14 to 20 plus people per block. That's over 400% plus intensification. We currently have a fixed income senior that lives next door to us. We gladly help her out in her day-to-day needs. She is currently assessing the need to move into Mittagong as she is isolated from all necessities of life and regularly relies on our family for transport support. She recently needed my wife to drive her to and from Bowral Hospital on multiple occasions for medical treatment as alternative transport was not available or cost prohibitive. The obvious and clear decision is to refuse the DA, as it is a block of units that is an affront to the Colavale village amenity and in no way could function as seniors or disability housing with Colavale's current infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. The questions to the applicant, to the speaker, yes.
Sorry, yes, go ahead.
Councillor Scandra.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the objector whether you mentioned block of flats or units, and you said 10 bedrooms, I think, in there. And we just heard before that we only have 4 two-storey buildings in the whole of Colavale, approximately. What is? Are you saying that you have a worry, a concern about the future in terms of more blocks of flats? Is that what you're saying?
Of course. Colavale is a small rural village. Our character statements that the council is actually now doing, the character statements will show that it's a small rural village. It does not have the infrastructure. It does not have the infrastructure to support the intensification that is even being even assessed in this. Okay, and like I said, we've got a senior. We help her every day. She had to go to hospital. She's got no thing. There's no transport.
Okay, you've answered.
Sure,
answered
go
the
ahead.
question.
Sorry, apologies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. The question is, as you might have heard, might be aware that
Sure.
our DCP say certain things, but I hope you understand that this is an SEPP,
Yes.
and that the state government overrides our own LEP and DCP to impose this on us. So,
And look, Schedule 1 of the DCP, Schedule 1 of the SEP actually says that does not apply, this SEP. So this SEP doesn't apply because it's a water drinking service area, it's water management, it's bushfire zone, so you can't actually apply the SEP. So if you're going to cherry pick the SEP, right, and then cherry pick the DCP, so you could support it and push it through council, why bother? Might as well just leave us all out of it and just do what you need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turlin?
Yeah, look, we've only got one plan here on the floor plan there, so I imagine the next floor's the same, but I don't know. I would assume so. And that's the 10 bedrooms you're talking about. But
Yeah.
senior living is what I believe is for having somebody there to responsibly look after the people. But what we've got is 2 bathrooms with 6 bedrooms and 2 small kitchens.
Question?
The question is, there's no lift in here. It doesn't look like it's a senior living development.
It's residential. It is being pushed in as a block of units under the SEP, and the SEP doesn't apply. Our DCP was silent on it. There's a reason our DCP is silent on it, because seniors cannot function properly in our little village. Increase our infrastructure, fix our transport, hey, more than happy. But as it stands now, our small rural village cannot accommodate seniors, and of this magnitude. It's unbelievable. It does not fit in.
Thank you. No more questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll take questions that have been raised, statements have been made after the those against for the development speak. Council still can ask questions of staff. So we have Joshua Graham in relation to in support.
Mr. Mayor.
And just to let councillors know, if there is a technical question that council that he cannot answer, his advisor over there will come forward. Over to you. You have the time.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and councillors, and thank you for taking the time to review our application for the seniors development. The design intent from the outset was to offer 4 architecturally designed seniors living units that would be appealing to downsizers within the area. The occupants will be over 55s that would not necessarily want to maintain their larger properties, or maybe not capable and would prefer to have a more manageable living space within their current location and without having to consider relocating to another suburb or city. The high levels of internal amenity, accessibility and uniqueness of the proposal are intended to set a benchmark for quality 2-storey buildings within the area, as is permitted within the zone, and is not intended to be used as a form of social housing, special or aged care. The architect was given a strict brief from myself and our town planner with respect to the applicable planning controls, which included the SEP and council's local controls for the Northern Villages precinct, which did lack any specific controls for seniors. So we tried to use the 2-storey controls for a dwelling house. The area is undergoing a transitional change and is noticeable with recent subdivisions, increased infrastructure and parkland projects. The subject site itself was a recent subdivision of 1 allotment into 4. Whilst the seniors housing is permitted in the zone, there is no accommodation for this growing demographic in the area, and this development would offer a diverse range of housing as is intended within the zone. The application to council was comprehensive and included a range of consultants to provide input. During the application process, we worked with council and Water New South Wales by responding to requests for information in a timely manner and with care to not strain council's resources with substandard responses. Post-notification, we were surprised to be confronted with so many submissions, of which we believe is possibly due to the community being unaware of this form of development being permissible in the zone. We took every submission seriously and immediately we re-engaged all of our consultants to assist with response. Upon council's request for further information, we increased the stormwater control measures on the site by remodelling the civil design. We increased our driveway width to allow passing vehicles for the 5 vehicles that are within the site. We redesigned our roof pitch, our preferred butterfly design, to reduce overshadowing, as was one of the complaints. We increased privacy control measures to prevent privacy, even though at the time there was no development to the north side of the block. We reduced the balcony size to the front from 30 square metres to 16. And once all the amendments were made as per Council's request, we further accepted Council's draft conditions to pay developer contributions to assist with future council projects for the local community, and also to construct a concrete footpath to Wattle Street from our particular site. Because one of the concerns was children and things walking on the road, and now we have a footpath, I guess, to service that as well. In conclusion, we respected the planning process and of the opinion that the proposal in front of you is the best mutual outcome for the site, and we hope that your decision is to support the council officer's decision to conditionally approve our proposal. Thank you.
Questions to Joshua? Councillor McLaughlin to...
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Graham. I think Councillor Turler made a good point. If this is a seniors living, and you're saying that you want, people need to age in place and what have you, and I find it hard that seniors are 55.
Please.
The question is, why did you not consider perhaps putting a lift for the second story? If
There has a lift.
It does have a lift.
Yeah,
Yes, it's in the report.
The whole site was designed by an access consultant and BCA consultant, so I'm a BCA consultant as well.
Just can't see it in the drawing.
Oh, that's fair enough. You haven't got the full set of drawings yet.
Oh, okay.
So I'm a BCA consultant myself, so the fire is not a problem. Accessibility, I engage one of access consultant to design, as the SEP requires a strict list of requirements. So footpaths from the principal road up through all the units. They're adaptable units as well, fully complying. Not for special aged care for over 55s. It's a range of disabilities as well, could occupy. And council has a condition that only certain sort of people can live in the building as well, so it can't be used for younger demographics.
Thank you, Mr Graham.
Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor. Mr Graham, could I just ask you, when you originally looked at...
Councillors, please.
When you looked at this, what made you decide to go to two-storey and build three-bedroom apartments on a site that is, well, as we heard, there's only 4 or so two-storey buildings, not even of this scale, in the whole of Colavale? This is equivalent to 3 4-storey buildings.
Thank you, Councillor.
What made you made that original decision to go two-storey as opposed to 1-storey?
I've done 2 of these in other areas, in Wollondilly and Camden. Those 2 were 5-unit developments under the SEP. It was based on comments and things from purchasers and people that are occupying the building. So I saw an opportunity to have a 2-storey building, which is permissible under the precinct, and I looked to make the most of the opportunity.
Right, but you didn't talk to the community here. Thank you.
Councillor Scandrett, you ask a question and then you sit down using a throwaway line. Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Markwart.
Thank you very much. Just a question on the, what assurance can you give us that it won't be used for general occupancy for people in flats per se, and only for seniors? How can we feel confident that will be the case? Thank you.
So it's actually a condition of consent. It has to be a condition in consent that's only over 55s or people with a disability. I would assume that if people illegally use the building, that they would be reprimanded appropriately as non-compliance with the consent. That's as with my other 2 development proposals. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Turlin.
I suppose the question is, looking at, well, I've only got one plan here, the ground floor, no idea what's happening on the top floor. It could nearly be used as, on the ground floor, boarding houses, could it not, as well?
Boarding house? No, that wouldn't be. You have to be approved with consent to use as a boarding home. They're self-contained dwellings, so they can only be used for self-contained purposes. If people are using them for boarding homes, it would
The only reason why I say there's 3 bedrooms for a senior living is extraordinary. Usually it's only 2.
Yeah, I went with 3 because I was thinking like 2 in a study or 3. I was trying to aim for higher end. People that want to maybe tuck away some storage or something like that. I mean, to me, 2 or 3 didn't really mean a lot of difference. It was more of something that attracted the. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Whipper.
Thanks. Mr Graham, you said you've done similar developments in Wollondilly and Camden. Whereabouts?
So I've done one in York Street in Tamworth.
Tamworth?
Yep. I did one on Old Hume Highway in Camden.
Okay. So they wouldn't really, you wouldn't classify those as small rural villages, would you?
They were in the same sort of situation with low-rise housing.
Would you classify them as small rural
Yeah,
villages?
I would.
You would?
Yes, yeah, where they were approved. Yes.
Okay.
Not in the CBD.
Thank you both. Councillor Nelson.
Just clarifying, did your research show that there was a need for this type of development in Cola Vale?
That was one of the, I wouldn't, yeah. This particular site was purchased because there was 3 other allotments that were recently subdivided and they ticked a lot of the boxes. It was a flat site. It suited. I like the area too. It is a beautiful area. I agree with all the people in the room, and I just thought that would be a nice spot for people who lived in the area to, like I said, downsize from rural property, maybe to something a bit smaller. I saw it as a really nice opportunity and a nice spot for it. Mm.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Thank you, Mr. Graham.
Not a problem. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, now there's been a few issues raised. Any questions back to staff? Councillor McLaughlin.
Councillor Markwood asked the question, Mr Mayor, how do we police this so that, I'm just wondering if staff can tell us how that would happen?
We have a lot of 55 developments in the Shire. Through you, Madam General Manager, Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, generally that's done via a Section 88B instrument that's placed on the site and it's registered on title for any future purchasers to be able to understand that it is only for over 55s. If it is a situation where it does come to our attention that somebody has bought it and is living there that's younger than that, obviously that becomes a development compliance related matter.
Thank you. Councillor Turlin.
Look, I know from the past at Robertson and other areas, we've actually restricted in the Sydney catchment zone senior living. Is that correct?
Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, seniors living development is basically under the SEP. It doesn't apply in the Shire. Essentially, what this is doing is drawing upon the DCP requirements. So,
it's what, sorry?
Draws upon the DCP requirements, which refers back to the SEP.
Can I just clarify another? It's about the same question. I know we've been to court on a couple of cases where we've refused senior living in the Sydney catchment zone because it's not allowed. You're saying it's used under...
Can you turn off your... Councillor Scandron. Thank you.
Around the table.
Okay, please don't turn off your mic.
So it's actually just to clarify that we have been to court because of the issue
Into
of
the mic,
refusing...
they can't hear you.
I'm trying to talk to our friend here
No,
as well.
you talk to the chair and that'll go through to him.
At my hearing level, you understand what I'm saying. We've been to court, we're refused under the requirement of being in a Sydney catchment zone. Why is this any different? Robertson was one of them, I remember it.
Through the Chair, those applications were lodged for permissibility under the SEP. This is permissibility under the LEP. We're using the LEP for permissibility of this development.
No, I don't think that's comments fair either. Councillor Mark Ward.
Thank you, Mr Chair. A question for Mr Wilton through the General Manager. It does refer to the word cherry picking. I'm just trying to seek clarification. When we reviewed and assessed this, did we actually look for every single clause through the DCP and the SEP to see what was relevant or not? Were we cherry picking? Were we not? Did we look at every option? Thank you.
Through the Chair, we refute any suggestion that obviously there's been cherry picking. There hasn't been. We've used the SEP as a guideline in order to assess this application. Otherwise, in the absence of that, there are no controls.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Scandron.
Mr Mayor, thank you. My question is, would an application for a single-storey development, Mr Wilton, of say three dwellings, say 2 to 3 bedrooms each, would that have had a different journey through council? Would there have been any particular things you would have focused on in that sort of application?
Thank you, Councillor Scandron.
I'd like to
move a bit hypothetical.
Move a motion after that, Mr Mayor.
No, Councillor Scandron, I'm not going to let you move a recommendation.
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
I said a motion.
Councillor, you are splitting hairs with a cleaver. Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, we can only comment on this application, but any other future application will obviously be subject to section 4.15 and it'll be assessed on its merits.
Thank you. I'm looking for somebody to move it, and I am not going to allow you, Councillor Scandron. Somebody like to move a recommendation?
I'd like to move a motion.
Nobody's prepared to move a... Councillor Marquardt?
I'll have to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Scandrett. No, Councillor Scandrett, don't look at me like that. If you wish to try and gazump the meeting...
Not at all. I just foreshadowed it, Mr Mayor. I just flagged I was going to move a motion.
Thank you,
I said I'd like
Councillor
to.
Scandrett.
Well, I would like to have had the
No, well, you haven't. It's been moved.
Okay, I'll move an amendment.
Move an amendment.
The amendment is that the application, shall I dictate this? Yeah. Okay, DA 19/0837 be refused for the following reasons.
It's a direct negative.
No, there's a point in it that brings it back. One, the bulk and scale is totally inappropriate.
No, Councillor Scandrett, that is a direct negative. You cannot move it. I disallow it. You can do it a motion arising if the motion that is before you is defeated.
The final point, Mr Mayor, then might sort it out.
Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, the final point...
Councillor Scandrett.
You won't let me speak today, will you?
Yeah.
The final point.
Thank you. Councillor Markward, do you wish to speak to your motion?
I will speak to the motion. I'm not quite sure which way I'll vote on this at this stage. I'm waiting to hear the rest of the debate, but I certainly think it's worthwhile putting forward on the table to have this debate. So I hear the community concerns. I hear them loud and clear. There's been a lot of noise in Cola Vale about this over a long period of time. But their community fears at this stage, I'm not sure how many would be realised. I don't know, and that's why I want to listen to the debate. The applicant has clearly listened to the community and talked to council, taken much of that into account and adjusted their proposal accordingly. There is a local demand for seniors living. It is a problem in the Shire. We need more diversity of housing in the Shire. We struggle to meet this demand. This appears to be aimed at the, I'll say, the mid to higher mid range of seniors living, and I think there's very little chance it will be used for flats per se, even if that is illegal or whatever. So I think there is a real requirement for this. I see there's some fear about it. I'm not sure if that fear is realised. I suspect it's not going to be realised, and I'll probably be supporting the motion, but I'll listen to the rest of the debate at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Markward. Councillor Scandrett.
Speaking against the motion, I have foreshadowed a motion arising. This is a block of flats, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Scandrett, you were asked that it be motion arising. You said, no, it's not. I am going to clarify. I ruled it out of order. If you want to follow meeting procedure and if you want to be part of this meeting today, then I suggest you follow the direction of the chair. And that is that you now recognise that it has to be a motion arising.
Yes, Mr Mayor, and you told me that it was a direct negative and I accepted that and sat down, Mr Mayor. So the bulk and scale is totally inappropriate for the Colo village, which only has four, we hear, approximately two-storey homes. And the average home in Colo Vale is 2 to 3 bedrooms. We saw that in Orchard Street, but some are clearly elsewhere in the village, the newer ones are 4 bedrooms. So it'd be fair to say the average home in the area is 3 bedrooms. So this is 10 bedrooms, being 4 homes. It's I describe it as a block of flats. I'm taking that from the objectors because I fear that this is going to be exactly what happens, is that a tsunami of applications like this will come in because they will enable price points to be met in the market. Now that may not be a bad thing, but the point is it's being done at the expense of the streetscape and the village atmosphere of a rural village. It's not an urban village, and certainly not, in my mind, like the Hume Highway or whatever up at Tamworth. I think this is very much a rural village, and we saw a tractor parked opposite this today. We saw farm sheds down some of the larger blocks. Now they're the blocks that are going to be at risk with this approval, because developers will come along and say, right, this will be a nice little village, we can do this, we can put in a seniors living. Now 3 bedrooms on the ground floor, 2 3-bedroom units, I go, well hang on, that's not downsizing, that's moving from big garden to small garden. That is not downsizing. This is not what the intention of this is. And as to how we control, there's no provision for us to control who lives in a place. Right? I've never seen in 7 years on council us even dare to step into the occupancy details of a seniors living. Never. So I don't know how that's going to work, but the size is totally inappropriate. You're talking of essentially 4 houses stacked onto a block. Now, that's the problem. If this was single story, and let's say it was 3 homes, as I said to the applicant, 3 homes, they might be 2 or 3 bedrooms each, that'd be far more reasonable because it would sit in the streetscape and it might even present to the street as one home with a driveway down the side. It could have been that sort of thing. So this is all about yield, Mr Mayor, not about providing a much needed service, because that idea of 3 homes on the ground would deliver that service without changing the streetscape. I'm concerned about some of the matters that were raised by the objector. Well, he was speaking on behalf of the community, I believe, in terms of car spaces and the lack of supporting reports and the description of the areas being an urban area, which it's not. I was concerned about the fact that he, and I don't think I've ever heard it, the community is contemplating a Class 4 action.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, I was keen to hear that the objector was also talking about Class 4 action. But anyway, I'll talk about that a bit later. When I read the report, Mr Mayor, I said to myself, I wouldn't like to be living next door to this building. And we heard the objections from the fellow, the objector there, and while he did speak quickly, he raised a number of issues. But the applicant did submit an application in good faith in accordance with the planning laws that we have before us. And having regard to the number of concerns that were raised by the Carlo Vale residents, the applicant did amend his plans. So the important issues that I read in the report, Mr Mayor, there was a number of issues addressed by the staff, and there's also a heading there called the key issues. So as I read through the submission, the staff addressed each one of those key issues, and I found it hard to then refuse the proposal having regard to the key issues. And the first one was the height, and it says that 2-storey are allowed. And we went out there today for an inspection, and as we drove around the area and then departed the area, there was a comment in the bus, look, there's a 2-storey, there's a 2-storey, there's a 2-storey. There was about 8 2-storeys within two blocks. So there's a number of 2-storey places there. The character of the place was raised, and it said that this should not be refused because of the character. The privacy and the overlooking concerns. The amended plans addressed those issues. The overshadowing. The roof was redesigned to address that issue. The location and access to the facilities. They were addressed to the extent that there's a condition number 28 put in that the applicant construct a footpath down to the bus. And I noted that the concerns of the residents saying that there was no transportation there. But in the report, it says that there's bus facilities there. So you've got to take what was there. But Mr Mayor, what really rattled me was the advice that I received from the staff when they said that between $50,000 to $200,000 could be incurred by council should the applicant take council to the Land and Environment Court. Now, I know council in the past has taken on issues, important principal issues, and spent a number of dollars. But anyway, Mr Mayor, I'll be voting for the proposal having regard to the report.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's interesting to note, Mr Mayor, that we are still the planning control in this Shire for this community. not like a lot of other communities, and I think Wallandilly's one, where there's a planning control committee. They've taken that out of the hands of the elected councillors. So, and the state government, of course, the state government is allowed to put up their SEPs, the State Environment Plan, which overrides us. My concerns on this is it appropriate to have seniors living in a village of this type? We know it's a long way out, and we've heard from one of the objectors just saying that how this works in the community. I have concerns that really it's about density. It's about high density and low density areas. The amenity, I take it, Councillor Nelson, you wouldn't like to be living next to it, either would I. So people that buy in a certain area should be entitled to a certain amenity in the area and enjoyment of their property. So they've got a neighbour on each side. But, as we heard, they're going to have a lot of neighbours here. I also find it a bit objectionable that you're a senior at 55. I mean,
Sorry, get used to it.
the state government, well, the federal government is moving for people not to get a pension till they're 68 or 70. So, you know, I should still be working. But, you know, these are the concerns I have with regard to what real amenities this are. And look, I know it ticks the boxes, and Councillor Nelson is correct that if we go down that path and we stand up for the community, we've got a good chance of being taken to that other place where it costs the community a lot of money. So I'm mindful of what you say there, and that's important. Look, I would like to oppose, I mean, we've seen high density, Mr Mayor, come through in R5 areas. I mean, I've opposed the one at OLSH in Bowral. I mean, the land use plan there says it has to maintain a semi-rural area. How can it maintain a semi-rural area, as the land use table says, when it's high density and it's just wall-to-wall concrete and buildings? So I have some real concerns that this will be a problem, and I'd really like to stand with the community on this. I'll listen to the rest of the debate on this. I think we're probably on a hiding to nothing, because I think our staff have ticked all the boxes, as Councillor Nelson said, as they had to, and it complies. And we're going to get people that'll pick these off right across our shire. So the amenity of areas and the character of our villages and towns will disappear because the state government override, through you, Mr Mayor, the state government, they're overriding us. But we are still the planning control, still. But who knows how long that'll be, Mr Mayor. They might take it away from us and then they will just impose it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Whipper, I think.
So, Mr Mayor, before I speak, I'd like to move an amendment. So before the clock starts, I'd like to...
Councillor
amendment.
Whipper.
So the amendment would read this way, Mr Mayor, that the applicant be invited to present redesigned plans for this development by reducing the bulk and scale of the building to a single storey.
Seconded. Thank you. You have a seconder? Councillor...
Could you repeat that?
Could you repeat that, please? You have it written?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, read it slowly.
That the applicant be invited
that the applicant resubmit,
Be invited.
Be invited.
to resubmit
Yeah.
amended plans
Amended plans, yeah.
to reduce
The bulk and
bulk
scale
scale to single story
of the development,
of the development.
yeah, to a single story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can speak to
I
it.
have a seconder.
Yes, you have a seconder, Councillor
So
Scanlon.
I'm speaking to the amendment and against the motion, Mr Mayor. I've heard the conversation. I've been out to a public meeting at Cullervale, as have a number of councillors here, and I live in a small rural village, unlike Camden or Tamworth, where I work. So I can assure you that Tamworth is not a small rural village, and the comparison is obscene. I think it's ridiculous. But anyway, that's a personal observation. I think one of the things we're trying to do here, Mr Mayor and councillors, is maintain, what it is that we call the Southern Highlands, the Wingecarribee. We're going through a process now that the government have permitted to actually put forward local character statements. I think that's critically important. Well, certainly, from my take, our villages are very specialised, they all have specialised personalities. Each is uniquely different. And to have this type of development, in my opinion, in a small rural village is not only impractical, but it changes the whole characteristic of the village itself. It's a precedent, we know that. If one developer gets away with this, there'll be more coming. And suddenly, before you know it, you haven't got a small rural village anymore. What you've got is an urban structure in the middle of nowhere with no resources, with no basic infrastructure, no medical centre, no transport, but all the negatives that come with it. And I think that's really concerning. That's why we're taking a breath and we're stopping to decide what the local character of this shire is. It's really something that we need to do. So this is certainly putting the cart before the horse. I think we need to back off and take the time, to acknowledge that this is, far different than other shires. And like Councillor McLaughlin said, Wallandilly do have a planning panel. Council don't have any say in approval of developments these days. I mean, how democratic is that? They're elected by the government, the council's elected by the community north of our shire to represent them, but they've got no powers of representation at all when it comes to planning. The panel's made up basically of developers, with, I believe, one community representative, and that's it. So, I think those comparisons between Wallandilly, Camden and Wingecarribee are just nonsensical. So, councillors, I think we should support the community here in this one. I think by reducing the bulk and scale, we at least make a statement that there is, something that we're appealing to the developers to consider. I don't think there's 8 doubles. I didn't see 8 double-storey houses today. There might have been a few, but I didn't see 8 double-storey. Maybe you were blurred vision or something. I don't know. But anyway, there's no doubt. I think this would change the characteristics and ask for support for the amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor Halstead.
I oppose the development outright, and that may come as a surprise to some of the staff. Look, I know they haven't relied upon an SEPP because you don't have to, because the DCP and our LEP obviously allow this to occur. But what disturbs me is that looking at the profile of what's been put before the council at the moment, I think it's a reasonable set of plans there for us to be looking at even tonight, if you haven't looked at them, is what it says to me is that the proposed development will be totally out of character with the whole housing stock in that area of Carlivale, in fact the whole of Carlivale, because it is a rural community. Having been involved in the planning of the northern villages some time back, I'm well aware of the history and where it's going. Now that worries me. The bulk and scale of that building, I mean, it boggles my mind when I look at it, particularly when I look at the elevations of it. And I'm thinking, how would anyone in their right mind think that fits with anything in the locality, adjoining, across the road, behind, totally out of character. And the people that have just built new houses in there would be horrified if they knew before the event that this sort of thing was going to be proposed. I know you can't predict that, nor can they. You can have a guess. But the other thing is, it's access to a local road, which is very narrow. I'm suggesting now it's what I consider 2-lane maximum, no curb and gutter. I'm trying to think whether there's other negative things in terms of infrastructure. I mean, obviously water's there and sewerage is there, so they're positives. But if you look at the occupancy rates of 4 dwellings like that, if you look at that compared with anywhere in that locality, it will be far more than what I'm about to tell you, which is double. It'll probably be more like 3 times the occupancy rate per dwelling. You're attracting 4 lots of families. There might be someone in there over 55. We need to be careful of that. as the town planner said. You'd have to cover that with a covenant. But if you looked at 3-bedroom units, or 3-bedroom houses even, you know, they're going to have an occupancy rate in a new area like that of probably 4. Yeah, it may be more, but the reality is it's probably going to be 5, but 4 or 5. So in these ones here, if you assume that they're going to be 3, that's 4 of them times 3 is 12 people, 2.5 times at least what's around there. Now, that's in raw figures, not trying to be a statistician or anything like that, or even trying to use current town planning density rates. But to me, it is totally out of character and should be opposed.
Oh, well, I think you take the gold star for finishing on time. Before I give you your right of reply...
I was going to speak to the amendment.
Against the amendment or for it? For the amendment.
Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Well, just before you do, I know you can speak to the amendment.
Just the
amendment. And then it'll be Councillor Scandrett speaking.
For the amendment.
Okay, I want somebody speaking against the amendment.
Don't have to.
For the amendment?
No, for the recommendation.
Okay, so it'll go Councillor Mark Ward, Councillor Andrews, then yourself. So
then I can speak for the
you will respectfully speak now.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor Whipper for his suggestion. I think that's a good middle course, and I will be supporting the amendment. Probably if that goes down, I may take a different attack. I'd just like to make a few comments. Basically, there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of words used, which I guess I have a personal problem with, things like wall-to-wall concrete, 4 stacked houses on a block, blocks of flats, Class 4 threats of action, threats of Class 4 action. I just don't think that's a decent part of the debate. We need to talk about the merits, the issues and such like, and not have hyperbole or scare tactics which basically are painting a bad picture in an imaginary way. We don't know all that. I mean, blocks of flats, stacked houses, wall-to-wall concrete, that's not what this is about. So I see the amendment as a way forward, which hopefully will bring us closer together. If that amendment gets up and if the discussions fail, however, it will come back to council and I'll make my decision then. So at this stage, I'll be supporting Councillor Whipper's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mark Ward. Councillor Andrews? No, yeah, you turn off your light. Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry.
I'm going around and you turn yours off, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise to support, I second it and I will support the recommendation. Very quickly, Councillor McLaughlin mentioned that seniors living is not probably the appropriate place in Coal Vale. You know, we regard seniors now at 55. I know how fit I was at 55 and I wouldn't mind doing it there. So I give the applicant credit for his concessions that he made, that he articulated here earlier in regard to the many, or not many, but some of the objections that were made. It's to his credit that he has made those concessions. There is definitely a demand for seniors living. Surely none of us would disagree with that in our shire. Councillor Scandrett made an issue on the height. Directly opposite this proposal, this application here, there's a 7-metre high-pitched roof directly opposite. At the end of Orchard Street, there's also another 2, similar height. And as you drive off Orchard Street into Myrtle Street, there's also another one of similar height. So the height shouldn't be an issue. Quite simply, I cannot, and it complies in every way, and we've had several reports both in the briefings this afternoon and here this evening stating quite clearly from our staff that this development, this DA application complies. And I certainly don't want a trip to the courts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Scandrett, then Councillor Turlett.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper, for articulating what was going to be the other point in my motion before. And I should point out, Mr Chairman, that section 11.6 and 11.7 of our current rules of code of meeting practice would have allowed me to explain that, because I should have been given the opportunity to clarify or amend the motion or amendment. You didn't do that, sir. Anyway, this is a good solution. It's one that a few of us were talking about when we were on the bus today and around the council chambers, because it does fit the bulk and scale of the street. It does fit the bulk and scale of the suburb, because the suburb is essentially single-storey buildings. And it's very reasonable, Councillor Andrews, to say, yes, there are a number of two-storey homes. This is not a two-storey home. They're three-bedroom, maybe four-bedroom, two-storey homes. This is a 10-bedroom, 5 living rooms, multiple bathrooms, 5 car spaces. Home? No. It's a block of flats, whichever way you look at it. And Councillor Halstead, who's an experienced planner and in every way, nailed it perfectly. Totally inappropriate for the location under many points, and that's why I think the community has got really behind this. I mean, I've never heard the community say to us, we might go take this further, we might take the objection further, and they might just be setting some local government precedents in that space if they did that. I hope we don't have to do that. I'm particularly concerned about the fact that this will bring a tsunami of multi-storey blocks of flats to this area. So Councillor Whipper has nailed it quite nicely. We are not Wallandilly. We are not Wallandilly with a panel. We are not wave it through. We are in control of our amenity and particularly our villages. Our villages, and I will say this quite carefully, have not been bastardised. They are original railway settler villages, mining villages and the like, particularly in the northern part of the Shire, and Colavale is one of the most delightful places around in its bushland setting. In fact, it'll be even more delightful when people will see the old heritage trains running through there again in the future. But I have to say, this development is totally out of character. Councillor Halstead was quite correct about the road and the services there, but the density is going to be what, 400% higher than the adjoining house? Same block. 400%, Mr Mayor, 400%. So, look, seniors living is price driven, Mr Mayor. That's what this is about. This is a cheaper level in terms of the land content per dwelling. That's what it's about. Yes, you end up with less yard to mow and all that, but it is a entry point. In Sydney, of course, something like 40% of housing now is multi-storey. I'll be supporting the amendment.
Councillor Turland.
Yeah, so I'm in two quandaries. One is that council recommended approval, and it's clear in the document that they do. But the second thing that I'm fighting with at the moment, that a senior living out at Colavale, it might not ever be sold, might get built, and therefore we're going to have a lemon sitting out there. So what happens? They come back to council and go, look, we've got a problem, it's not been rented, it's not been sold. What do we do? So then we've got, as I mentioned before, the possibility of a request for a boarding house. And that goes around contrary to what we're about to approve. So I'm actually fighting with those two things in my mind at the moment. Compliance with all the requirements, which is put in front of council staff, which is put in front of us, we make the decision that's here. But my mind goes back to the point, who the hell's going to live in a senior living development in Colavale? And what happens if it fails? You will have a building there with nothing. So I'll come back, somebody will come back and go, we want to change the requirements. And that's what's concerning me critically at the moment, is my mind which way to go. I also looked on Google Earth, and looking at if you're a senior living person and you don't have a car, which is what the whole reason is, the shop is probably, looking on Google Earth, probably close to 700, maybe a kilometre away from, there's only one shop out there, well, close to it, then you've got the hall and so on. Public transport will be there, the bus is on the corner, yeah, okay, that's good, but you can't rely upon our local bus service to be out there every 2 hours to pick up somebody who's in need, let alone to go to the doctor. Imagine if you were picked up by a local taxi to go in a Mittagong to see a doctor or a hospital, it would cost you $30 either way, maybe. So I actually try and fight with those three positions, even though council staff recommended. So I'm not quite sure which way I'm going to go at the moment, but I'm just explaining my position. I just think it possibly could be a problem if they don't get rented or sold. I don't think you can rent them. I don't think that would be the case, because that wouldn't be required under the Act. You'd have to sell them. You can't rent them. So that's what I'm fighting with. I've just put that out to you.
Okay, speaking
in
for
relation
the
to the amendment,
against the amendment, Councillor Turland, he spoke nowhere because he's not exactly sure where he's standing.
Well, since I spoke for the motion, I'd be speaking against the amendment. But in saying that, I would gladly support a single dwelling there. And Mr Mayor, the applicant's here. You can turn around and ask him if
No,
he support a single dwelling, a single story there, and I think that'd be satisfactory for everyone concerned. But I don't think that he'll do that. He's put a lot of time and energy into this, so I think he's going to stick to his guns and stick with his proposal. So. And what I'm concerned about is if we do go down the path of refusal, the ratepayers of this shire will be spending between 50, although we've always been told it's a minimum 70,000, to 200,000 in legal costs. And don't we get criticised for our legal costs here? 1.7 or 1.3 million we've spent in legal costs, and so I've made a stance since I've been on council to not spend ratepayers' money, because I stand here representing all the ratepayers of the shire, and not just the ratepayers of Coalvale, as much as this is where this application is. And I'm sorry that Councillor Whipper took the opportunity to get a little bit personal and criticise me for my blurred vision. On the bus today, but it was suggested by a few. I mean, I could be very cynical, Mr Mayor, and say there's a lot more votes in refusing this than there is in supporting the motion. So that's where I'll be going. And Councillor Turlin, he's the chairman of our local transport community, our community transport. So, you know, if the people up there having trouble catching the bus, they can call on our community transport, because they need all the money they can get.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor, which way are we going? For the motion, against the amendment?
I spoke to the amendment. I'm speaking against the motion.
You may have speak against the motion.
Mr Mayor. Look, just a clarification. Councillor Nelson did say it's either refusal or approval. The amendment is not a refusal. What the amendment does is provide an opportunity for the developer to get in sync with the expectations of people who live in a small rural village. I mean, that would be the obvious thing to do, to consult, to talk, and to get on with your neighbours. Realistically, I mean, if this can fit in with the landscape to a greater degree, then it accommodates everybody's expectations. And, you know, to build something like that, I live in a small rural village, it's remote as well, and to build something like this leads to isolation. The more people you put into a facility like this, the more you isolate those people. Now, realistically, anybody who really needs a facility like this would move into one of our major towns and then avail themselves of all the opportunities that those towns provide, including medical supports and other services. Here, look, I just can't, the nexus just doesn't exist. It's just creating more opportunity for more housing, for more people to live, you know, in isolation. Certainly those seniors don't need that, particularly when they may be a bus stop, but a bus stop to where? I mean, really, in a village like that. So I think we need to listen, councillors, to the people who live in these villages. Who knows better than those people? I do apologise to Councillor Nelson. That was just a tongue-in-cheek statement, so I do apologise. And I hope you accept that apology. But councillors, look, I think the best way forward is to give the developer an opportunity to sit down with council and the community and to fit and become a part of that community. It's not unreasonable, is it?
Councillor, okay, I'll
Do you want to speak first?
Yes, I'll speak. I'll support the recommendation. I have heard a lot of semantics and what could happen, what may happen, and it was summed up very clearly, I think even by Councillor Turlin or Nelson, who said, we are here on its merits. Does it meet what the planners have gone through and ticked the boxes? if somebody is sick or whatever, then that is just subjective comment. What we do know is that it meets the requirements under the state legislation, which has changed its legislation to allow this. To me, it's a lay-down misère. And we're talking about court action or whatever. Again, that is subjective to whether that would happen. But I do know that a two-storey house could be built on that block that would take up the whole block. Simple as that. Can be done. And it has been raised about other villages, that this is a village. I have been into, and we can all drive around villages in Bundanoon, Robertson, whatever, and there are big houses on blocks of land like this. And they get approved because they meet the criteria. Because it's two-storey, and as Councillor Nelson, I think I counted 6, maybe not quite 8, Councillor Nelson, but it's up there. And there is a couple of big two-storey buildings. Now, the comment has been brought up about density, and within the planning, again, and if you talk about wanting to go to court or whatever, does it meet disability? The proposed floor space ratio of the development is 0.48 to 1. Complying with the 0.5.1 maximum floor space ratio. So it's below even the floor space ratio. Whether I like it or not, whether I would want it next to me, I'm sorry, I can't take that in consideration. Does it meet the planning criteria? And yes, it does. And have I seen developments that I've supported over the years I've been on council and voted in support? We voted to allow 4 or 5 houses to be built on the right-hand side past the Briars, not because we wanted to, but because it's permissible, because the land has been subdivided and houses can be built. And exactly the same here. Councillor Mark Ward.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. Very difficult. I like the amendment, but I actually agree with much of what you've said here. Basically, there is a demand for this sort of housing. We need more diversity. And who are we to say this should not be available in Coal Vale because Coal Vale over 55s don't want this? They may well want it. That's their choice, not ours. We have to offer the options. We have to assist people to offer these options. The other question I ask is, if not in Coal Vale, where? If not in Robertson, where? I don't know. It does comply. So I think at this stage I'll probably support the motion, with some regrets actually, but I think I will probably support the motion because it does comply. There is a need. I don't want to spend $40,000 or $50,000 in court or council to spend that sort of money. So I think at that stage where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. That closes the debate, so I put the amendment as moved by Councillor Whipper. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett, Whipper, Halstead and McLaughlin. Those against? I declare the amendment lost. I now put the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. So, Councillors Turland, Nelson, Andrews, Mark, Wharton, Gare. I declare the motion carried and the development... against? Halstead, Whipper, McLaughlin and Scandrett. I apologise for that. The development application has been approved. We now move to 8.2 commercial alterations and additions, extensions, Throsby Manor, page 51. And in relation to that, we have Mr Stephen Thompson-King will address council against the motion. Councillors, I got into strife. I broke a bit of protocol to see how it went. do you want the introduction first from council staff to give you an overview so you can ask? Yeah, yeah, that's how we used to do it, and then somehow we changed. So we'll ask, yes. So we'll ask introduction from the applicant, from Mr. Wilton on behalf of the applicant.
Through the Chair, the purpose of this report is to consider to application 191374, which seeks development consent for the purposes of service departments at Throsby Manor, 1A, Throsby Street, Mossvale.
Mr. Wilton, before you do, it has pointed out to me that a councillor has been posting messages on Facebook, his Facebook page, our Facebook page, Wingecarribee, who is a sitting councillor tonight. Now, I would like that councillor to identify themselves, please. Then I shall get clarification from the staff, but that is a reportable offence. If you are doing that on council's Facebook page, it will not be tolerated.
During the commentary of the last...
I will clarify it before I take it any further. Mr. Wilton.
Through the Chair, the site is zoned R2, low density residential under the Wingecarribee Local Environment Plan 2010, and service departments are permissible with development consent. The site is located on the southern fringe of the Mossvale CBD and occupies an area of 1,770 square metres. Councillors be aware that the original building was constructed in 1890 and has been used for both residential purposes and also for commercial purposes, namely council chambers for the former Mossvale Council. The current proposal before council this evening seeks consent to alter the use of the site to service departments undertaking minor building alterations to the interior of the building and also undertaking a rear ground floor extension to enable a common room, kitchen, dining room facilities and also provide for an outdoor fireplace and chimney. The proposal as submitted seeks to retain the existing mature landscape in the site and the built form presentation to the street, with the proposed rear building alterations being sympathetic to the main Throsby Manor building. The proposal was neighbour notified between the 29th of March and also the 16th of April 2019, with 10 submissions being received during this period, and one petition was also received containing 18 signatures. Those submissions have been detailed relating to air quality, lighting, design, heritage considerations, overshadowing, exterior colours and also noise impacts, and they've been appropriately addressed within pages 59 to 61 of the report this evening. On balance, council staff considered the merits of the proposal and have recommended approval subject to conditions of consent.
Thank you, Mr. Wilton. Before I go to questions, I would like all councillors to place their mobile phones and laptop on top of the table in everybody's view, and the councillor who has been putting like or dislike on not commentary but comments on like or not on our Facebook page, I'll be taking that matter further after the meeting. So I'd like all councillors, including you councillors who haven't got their mobile phone, to put them in public view, and your laptops, please.
Mr. Mayor, mine's in my bag and I'm not taking it.
That's fine.
They remain there every council meeting. iPad and phone, so I'm not changing that.
That's fine. If it's in your bag, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Scandrett. Okay, is your iPad there as well? Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Scandrett. I'll ask you to leave the chamber if you continue one more time. Questions to Mr. Wilton? Questions to Mr. Wilton?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to Mr. Wilton, and this was a matter that did come to the Heritage Committee, and the question, and we did make a comment, and to Mr. Wilton, just to satisfy the community that those comments that were made by the Heritage Committee and the comments made by the broader community, I believe, were were taken on board by the planners. That's basically what I'm asking, that they were considered. Thank you.
Through the Chair, all submissions that were received during the submission period were considered. Those relating to heritage matters were put before the heritage consultant for consideration and as resulted in the report this evening.
Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just for the record, I have not posted any...
Councillor Scandrett.
No, I just don't like...
Councillor Scandrett, will you please leave the chamber?
I'll read my submission. Yeah.
Will you leave the chamber or will you behave yourself?
Well, I have behaved myself, Mr Mayor.
No more warnings, Councillor Scandrett. No more warnings.
Okay, Mr Mayor, but you're not giving me the opportunity to defend the accusation you're making.
Councillor Scandrett, I have not made any accusation against you. You may have just accused yourself.
No, you pointed at me.
Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, the Southern Highlands National Trust made a submission here. Councillor McLaughlin, I'm not sure that you were at a funeral this morning, you might not be aware of this, but I have since confirmed it was assessed by the staff. But I'd just like to read from that to then ask a question, and that is that they talk about the chimneys and the visual impact of the proposed additions from the sightlines from Throsby Street. How was that assessed, Mr.
Thank you,
Wilton,
Councillor Scandrett.
in terms of visual impact, and were there any offers there or discussions about varying that?
Through the Chair, those matters that specifically raised in that submission were considered by our heritage consultant. It was deemed that that built form element to the rear of the site and also to the left-hand side of that building were sympathetic to the main building, and therefore were considered warranting approval.
Thank you. Councillor Turlett.
Yeah, look, the only thing looking through the DA here that I'm concerned about, and it's probably going to be in the CC, is that we're now changing from a commercial facility to a residential in theory. So a lot of fire upgrade and would have to be undertaken, I would assume, to comply with the new regulations to make sure, as I said, because it's now a residence when people sleep in it. Is that how I understand to be the case?
Mr. Wilton.
Through the Chair, any broader considerations in relation to fire safety at DA stage are considered. It has been referred through to our accredited certifiers who have not raised any additional considerations. Once the construction certificate does come through for any building alterations, then that will be considered in more detail at that stage.
Thank you. Councillor Whipper.
Through you, Acting GM, to Mr. Wilton. Mr. Wilton, one of the objections is in relation to light spill. Do we have a policy in place where we limit external lighting to full cutout?
Mr.
Through the Chair, yes, Council does have a policy. It's in our development control plan. There is a condition of development consent that's been prescribed in relation to light spill for this development.
Okay, so it is full cutout, is that right? Which means there's no sideway light spill.
Through the Chair, that is correct. So the lights will have to face towards the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. No further questions, and I'll invite Mr. Stephen Thompson King will address Council against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I represent residents of Throsby and Arthur Street who view this building and the proposal. So we're not objecting to the change of use or the development itself. It's specific, one specific issue, and that is that this is a heritage building, a heritage listed with the council. And one of the very important issues with heritage are sight lines. So with natural or built environments, it's a sight line. And the specific that we object to here is that it's the freestanding fireplace and its attached two-storey chimney that sits midway across the garden to the southern boundary, so that if you're looking at the heritage building from either Throsby or Arthur Street, you will see a two-storey chimney sitting out there in the middle of the garden, with, of course, the associated behind that, the associated great room or kitchen and dining room. So that is why we, and I believe the National Trust, the objections are based upon that, not upon the change of use. So I think it's totally out of character. The sight lines, there is a large rear garden of this property. There's also space to the right-hand side of the property, but within the wall lines, if you'd like to use that, looking backwards, where the whole extension could be moved to the north and still within the, if you like to call it, the boundary lines of the walls of the existing heritage building, or the chimney itself could be relocated and the fireplace relocated into the rear garden of this extension. It is totally inappropriate that it be sitting in the sight views from Arthur and Throsby Street. So that is our prime objection. And I find it, I guess, sad that the objectors have been ignored and the National Trust have been ignored by Heritage in the council, that this major factor has been ignored. And also, one last fact is that it would seem the residents of Unit 3, 4 and 5 of number 1 Throsby Street, who adjoin the boundary on the southern line where this chimney and fireplace go, the council report says that there will be no air pollution impacts on those residents. And so we would ask, would the council therefore set up air monitoring quality now and then monitor again if this fireplace is approved to see if there is in fact no impact upon us? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you, councillors. Questions? Councillor Turley.
Yeah, so here's our fireplace here, which is in question, I believe.
That's correct.
So you're suggesting to move it to here or there?
No, I'm suggesting that if you look at, I can't point from here, but
can we get a map up on the...
So you can see it, you can mark it on the plan.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I can't show you, where are we? Here we go.
You've got it
the
right
right
there.
way, yes. There's no visual up there, right?
No, we can't.
No,
Let's
okay.
mark it on the pen and I'll show you.
All right, mark it. Well, you can remove, I'm suggesting that the fireplace could go, thank you, there, or the chimney and the fireplace, so it's an outside barbecue. It's purely, I don't know, for fun or something. I don't think it adds to the heritage value at all of the building. So it can be relocated into the rear garden, to the right or the northern side of the building. Oh, sorry, yes, okay.
Yes, you can point it down up there,
Yes,
Steve.
okay, thanks. All right, okay, let's have
On the plan back.
I've got to get a sort of... Oh, here we are, okay. So this is the southern, you've got Throsby Street here and Arthur Street here. So garden, looking this way, there is the one-storey great room, which I'm calling that the kitchen, dining room, which here's the line of the building. So here is the extension. If you're looking from the front, you'll see the one-storey, and one-storey as in it's quite high, as in 19th century sort of height. And you've got this chimney fireplace sitting out here in the middle of the garden. So you're looking here at a two-storey chimney stack. The sight line is destroyed. To come to the issue, this could be relocated anywhere. You've also got, here's the sight line of the building, space here. If it's an outdoor barbecue area, which it basically is on a large scale, you've got all this big garden to have it in.
Okay.
Like, there's the whole garden.
If it was just pushed back against the building, straight back, straight back.
Yeah, you mean as in this line here?
Yeah, just move it from where it is now facing
push the
south.
whole-
It's on the north, that's just straight forward.
Yep, like that. That would solve, for me and other objectors, the concept of the heritage site.
It's going to be beside the building and it's going to be same as the
Yes,
two-story.
because they're already two. Is that yours?
No,
you can have that one.
you've just done it.
Rip that off.
Okay.
It is the same. So there is
Thank
a
you.
two-storey building with two-storey chimneys.
Councillors McLaughlin.
Well, I think Councillor Turlin has asked my question because this was the discussion we had at the Heritage Committee, and it was the sight line, so thanks for bringing that up. And I was going to ask you your suggestion, but you've made a very good suggestion, and I'm happy to probably move that in the recommendation. So I really haven't got a question, Mr Mayor, because it's been answered, so thanks for that.
Thank you. Carries the question. Councillor Mark Ward.
Thank you very much. I just note in this elevation,
Yes.
we do have a few trees in the way. You don't believe they have a...
They're deciduous trees. So if you were to go there now,
Well,
are you talking about as in the view?
Yes, the sight lines, would the trees block the chimney?
Only in full summer. If you go there now from May right through to September,
Okay.
it's
They're just
quite,
citrus.
yes, they're deciduous trees.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, just a clarification from Mr King. Are you suggesting, Mr King, that the Skillion extension be cut off to line up with the left-hand side of the building, as well as moving the fireplace against the building?
Well, yes, I think what
Could you
I
just clarify
suggest, well,
that?
in my submission, and I think that the National Trust also
Yes,
says,
indeed.
and other submissions say similar
Yes.
things. I've just said that.
Those sight
For those
lines.
people can see, this is Throsby Street, the existing 19th century heritage building. Here is the extension. You could, the architect, I'm assuming, could bring this into a line.
Yes.
So you've got the sight lines of the
Right,
building.
well, that's what
There's
I'd like to-
nothing out there visually interfering with those heritage views.
Thank you, Mr King. That's what Councillor McLaughlin, I'll be supporting that.
Okay. Thank you. Great.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay, we'll be asking Luke Maloney will address council on behalf of the applicant. You know the rules?
No.
3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Luke Maloney. I'm the architect of the proposal. I would like to just say that in designing this scheme, my background professionally is primarily with historic buildings and working with heritage architecture. So the scheme was carefully designed to make high quality guest accommodation that will make a positive difference to a significant building, which is important to the community. And we've taken a lot of care with design to design something that is appropriate for the setting. And it's a setting which has a busy commercial area to the north of the site, a quiet residential area to the south, and the Great Southern Railway immediately on the western boundary. And of course, there's a lovely heritage building in the middle. The building's currently used commercially. There are 9 consulting rooms for professionals and visiting clients. We anticipate that vehicular movements to the site will decrease under the proposal, simply because guests are less likely to receive patients or clients as the occupants of the building do today. The proposed addition to the rear is modest in scale, which means that the historic building remains the primary feature of the site. The reception and the entrance we've located on the northern side of the building so that comings and goings take place away from neighbours' homes to the south. This also preserves the existing vehicular access to the site, which is important to make the project economically viable. No new windows directly overlook the neighbours. Visual privacy between sites will be maintained by the existing line of mature trees on the boundary. I believe the tree in question in front of the contentious chimney is a cherry laurel, which I understand is, yeah.
Continue
I'll
on.
continue.
Don't take any names, councillors, please.
So, look, I understand and I hear the concerns from the neighbours about the proposed outdoor chimney, and I would offer to you that it is set well inside the minimum setbacks, and it's in a spot where, because there is the Great Southern Railway on the western boundary, if we're looking to make a place where occupants of the building can gather outside, that's a part of the site where the building offers a natural acoustic buffer from the train line on the back. We're not proposing that any of the windows facing west to the railway are able to be opened. They're to be to offer sound insulation from the railway there. So I would suggest that the landscape site between the car park and the building is to be a beautiful garden to be looked into, but not necessarily. It's not a great outdoor space.
Questions, Mr. Mayor?
Stay there. Questions? Councillor McLaughlin.
Look, thank you very much for designing this, and it was nice that you said that you've taken on board some of the comments previously said, and the Heritage Committee did have some concerns about the sight lines with the chimney. And what I'm putting to you now, and I don't want you to be offended as an architect under Heritage, but you've heard, I think, what the residents feel. I'm just wondering if you could look at a redesign that would accomplish basically what you set out to do, and I hear your arguments about the train line, but it does stick in our face the chimney aspect. That, more to me than anything, is what destroys it. So can you,
It's a question.
practically redesign this to enable us to still approve your development, but not with this chimney in this position?
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin.
We could relocate the chimney, of course, but I don't think the design outcome would be as good as the one that we have in front of you now.
Thank you. Councillor Scandrett.
Yes, thank you. And again, same sentiments here. It's very generally a very high quality redevelopment. So thank you for that. I think visitor accommodation in Mossvale is important. My question to you is, you've answered the chimney, but could you also trim the skillion to align with that side of the building? I mean, the answer, of course, is yes, but are there any particular reasons?
It would
Councillors, please.
It would involve substantial redesign. The size of the rear addition, and again, it's not big, it does project to the south, but that is because if we're looking at guest accommodation with 7 rooms, so approximately 14 people, that means if you were giving them a lounge room and a dining table, then that connotes a building of a certain size. I'd also argue or suggest that in glimpsing a piece of modern architecture, and it will be of high quality, our aspiration is to do something good and beautiful here. It's small, it's single story, it will be visually recessive, it will be very elegantly detailed, and I think there's something positive about seeing the new and the old together. That if the elements are considered and the design is good, rather than hiding it away or making it of the same materials and achieving monotony, you can have two things that sit in comfort together, and you have something in harmony. And I think that's a positive thing in the streetscape.
Well, I guess the other alternative is to extend it out a bit. Would that be possible?
Again, I would say that it is possible, but these are all options we considered during the design process, and I feel that the one we have before you is good.
Thank you, Luke. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you for and thank you for your presentation. I'll just lead into the question very, very briefly. Part of our report here says, further to it goes to conclude that the proposal meets the constraint as specified in the Conservation Management Plan 2006 to ensure that the important streetscape vistas from Arthur Street and Throsby Street are maintained. I'm wondering, and you did mention briefly, there is a significant tree in front of that chimney viewing from Throsby Street. Can you confirm that it is deciduous or not?
The owner of the site has informed me that it's a cherry laurel. So that's
no horticulturist. Is it deciduous?
Nor am I.
Okay,
that's quite important because it would screen it if it wasn't.
It seems to be an unsure answer. Councillor Turler.
I'll give you the plan back, if I may. And that's where the gentleman in red would suggest that we move the chimney back against the wall. Therefore, the rest of your skillion roof's not a problem. The rest of your windows there, which are black, aren't a problem. It's just moving that fireplace over. I would probably still think where the fireplace is now, you would still do a wall at a certain height to keep the noise down from the neighbours.
Yep.
But I think if you could move that chimney there, you've got it approved tonight.
Can I talk to the rationale as to why it is here?
You've explained it to me, you and I.
Okay, well,
Yep.
The question is, will you move it?
Again, of course we can, but I would come back. I don't think the resulting design will be as good as the one that we have in front of you, and that is taking concerns into the usability of the building, but also how the new building sits with the historic architecture. If you look at the facade of Throsby Manor at the moment, it's got incredibly strong vertical elements spaced with a certain rhythm. Jamming another one hard up against it won't be as successful as observing that spatial articulation of the strong vertical elements. I'd also suggest that the chimney is set very far back from the front, and it's in a garden setting. So it will of course be visible, but I don't think it's, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mark Ward, last question.
Thank you very much. A question through the chair, of course, for Mr Maloney. Can you describe the physical exterior treatment of the chimney, the colour, the texture, all this sort of thing, and how it relates to the building, please?
Rendered masonry, so the same as the two-storey building. A pale off-white. The colour that was... we had a question, or we supplied further information to Council's heritage advisors. So specifically, the colour would be an off-white called Murabond Quarry, I think at 75%. Same colour as the building, yeah.
Okay, thank you, and thank you very much, Mr Maloney.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Councillor McLaughlin.
Look, Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move the recommendation with an addition if I get a supporter.
Just move the recommendation.
Yeah.
With an addition, just move it.
Okay, well, I'll move that.
As it is. And what is your addition?
Well, my addition is a redesign of the chimney.
A redesign or different placement?
I don't know if you really need a chimney that high to start with,
No,
but anyway.
no.
Okay, I'll say a redesign that it doesn't interfere with the architectural views and the heritage aspects of that property with the chimney.
Okay, then we will have to get that up, that the chimney be redesigned.
Or relocated could be a better word.
It's your motion.
Okay.
So is it relocated?
The chimney be redesigned
please,
and/or stroke relocated to preserve the heritage sight lines of the building. Well,
Okay.
I think there's plenty of options.
No, woo. Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Scandron.
Okay.
Okay, you can speak to it.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I like to see a heritage building being reused and appreciate it for its value. And I think that does this. It's a good report, and I appreciate the Speaker and the architect with regard to really having some interest in our heritage item. And it is a very significant heritage item, Mr Mayor, in our Shire. I still don't know why you need such a massive chimney, but anyway, I'll leave that. But I think the general thrust of reusing this building, and buildings, as we know, if they don't get used, Mr Mayor, and we've seen some in our shires, unfortunately, they've suddenly, in the middle of the night, caught fire, disappeared. And that's unfortunate. So we've got to have a use for our buildings. I think this is a great use for the building. And I think the owners will do a great job, and this looks good. This is only a small bit to ask for, and I'm sure if there is the concern we've heard from the community on this, and as you heard, the residents are not opposed to the reuse of this building for residential purposes. It's a good way forward. But I think preserving the heritage lines, the sight lines are important to the community and to this council, to the Heritage Committee and to the National Trust. So I don't think we can just disregard all those objections. So, you know, we have heard from the architect it wouldn't be as good a result. Do we really need to have a chimney that high? This is a barbecue area. I mean, how many people have a two-storey chimney at a barbecue? I know it's a heritage building. Maybe they thought it would work nicely. But I think, apart from that, I'd be happy to support it. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Scandrett, for or against?
I'm seconding it, Mr Mayor.
Then anybody against the recommendation? Then I'm only going to take, at this stage of the game, I am only going to take 2 speakers for, because we have spent 2 hours getting to this point on one motion. So I will take 2 speakers for, unless there's a speaker against. Then you have the right.
Sure.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, we're past question time with the staff, but in the body of the report, and Councillor Andrews alluded to it, but the paragraph before that says, the conclusion of this report is the proposed alterations and additions will revitalise the heritage structure and allow its adaptive reuse, which in turn will ensure that it continues to be utilised and maintained. Further, it goes on to conclude that the proposal meets the constraints as specified in the Conservation Management Plan 2006 to ensure that the important streetscape vista from Arthur Street and Throsby Street are maintained. So, you know, the staff have looked at this, and I've looked through the report and I can't see much reference to the chimney and the aspects of it. So, you know,
Councillor McLaughlin.
Anyway, I'm waiting to listen to a bit more of the debate about this.
Okay, Speaker for, Councillor Scandrett.
Well, Councillor Nelson, let me add this. I had drafted something here which is relevant, that the ski in addition be reduced to align with the sides of the building and extended west of as appropriate, and that the outdoor chimney be redesigned to abut the ski-in and building on the southern side. So those sort of comments may clarify where my thinking was on it, and Councillor McLaughlin, I would be happy to suggest something to tighten that up a bit there in terms of B, you know, to the southern side of the building, to abut the building and the ski-in, if you wanted to. Okay, and in terms of the ski-in itself, which I think is visually intrusive because of the height it is, because it's going back to a box gutter for part of its width. I'd personally prefer the ski-in to be
Councillor Scandrett to the chair.
A bit deeper. Mr Mayor, this is obviously a very significant building because it was originally the home of council. I think the passion of the residents in that area is quite obvious in terms of how they would like to see that building, and it stands alone in its curtilage. It's surrounded by a good amount of green, and it stands alone, and which I think points to its very heritage. That curtilage is highlighting it. So certainly, in my view, the chimney was out of place in a standalone location. It was sort of like what burnt down there and left the chimney. That was sort of thought, you know. And I don't think that's appropriate for that precinct. It's a mixed precinct. It's got blocks of blonde brick flats across the road from it, and so on. But along Throsby Street, essentially the residential character of single-storey homes is still there, and they do have decent chimneys, they do have decent verandas and so on. So it's got a significance. I don't disagree with the National Trust's comments in terms of acknowledging those 2 sight lines, left and right of the building. I would have liked to have seen here, Councillor, the strengthening of maybe reducing that ski-in width so it doesn't protrude and letting it go back to capture the floor space, and I'm happy to hear anything you have in that space.
Thank you. Councillor Scandrett. Mark Ward.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'd like to move an amendment, if I may, and that is basically the original motion without the section A. Is that permissible?
Yes, you can move that without, and you got a second, Councillor Andrews.
I'll ask for
So
that.
you're moving the recommendation without point B.
That's correct.
You can speak to it.
Thank you very much. Once upon a time, many years ago, I was told the best way to hide something was to basically make it part of the structure, if you like. And I tend to agree with, Mr Luke Maloney, that the chimney itself is integrated into the structure, the format. You have this vertical line view here, and it goes bang, 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 bang. Bang. Bang, bang. If you move the chimney closer to the building, it would actually unbalance that building, I believe. The symmetry would be gone. So I think I'd prefer to stick with the original design and support the architect on this. It just has that symmetry. But I do hasten to add, I am not a heritage expert, I'm not an architect. But for my money, visually, that looks better than what is proposed in the amendment. So I'll be voting for the amendment if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Markwart. Now, seeing there has been amendment moved, then we can go the other way. Councillor Turley.
Well, Google Earth shows me a shadow, and the shadow actually is pretty well what the plan is. That's a shadow that shows where the physical drawing is going to be. But what I'm trying to show you is the plants. These are the plants, the trees, whatever the cherry tree that was mentioned. It is there. So I don't think it's even going to be seen, the chimney, to be honest with you. But I believe that the benefit is that if we move it close to the building, it appeases a group of people. Sorry, wrong way. It appeases, you can see the trees. You're not going to see it from the street anyway. But the issue is if it gets the settlement between the group of residents, I think it'd be good if the architect could move the chimney against the skiing roof, the building itself, the extension. Not a problem. Pretty close to exactly what the shadow is on that particular Google Earth plan. The chimney seems to be the issue. It's a barbecue. Move it a bit, it's all over, it's finished, and they can move forward on it. So I don't think the chimney should be the biggest issue here tonight.
Councillors, are nobody for the amendment? Against the amendment? Okay, well, I'll be speaking for the motion as moved by Councillor Markwart. I think there's a hypothetical in relation to what may or may not happen with the chimney. I'm a bit with Councillor Markwart. I cannot see how this is going to affect the streetscape to any huge degree or anything else. So I'm supporting the recommendation. Your right of reply, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, whichever way this goes tonight, we're going to see a revamp of a beautiful building. I understand Councillor Scandred saying he wanted to reduce all this. I think to get the life back into the building, you have to provide a certain amount of amenity to that area at the back, the new section, and I think that's acceptable. I think council staff in the report have shown that works. I just think I've got a problem at looking at this, Mr. Mayor. When you look at the front of the building, you do see that sticks out like a sore thumb, an absolute sore thumb, that one. Now, if that was gone, and as Councillor Turner said, it's a barbecue. Have you got a barbecue at home, Mr. Mayor? Do you really need a chimney 2-storey high? I think it's a small thing to ask. It could just go. It could just go. Whether it's put somewhere else or whether it's just taken off. I think if it was just taken off, it's something...
Just as a correction, it does say open fireplace as well.
Well, open fireplace.
Let's give reasons why.
Okay.
That's only just to clarify.
Yeah, okay, an open fireplace.
It is more than the barbecue.
Anyway, I just think if we've got such a valuable heritage item from the street, if you do see that, it does destroy the lines of the seat from the street. The architect that designed this originally designed a beautiful building. To have this tacked on the side, I think, really, I know we've had our heritage people, heritage consultant look at this and saying he didn't think it was worrying, but I know there was, from the community, from the Heritage Committee, we did have some problems with that. So I'll leave it with you, councillors, but I'm happy to see it go forward, but I think we could do without the chimney.
Okay, the amendment as moved as the recommendation, I will put first. All in favour of the amendment moved by Councillor Markwart. Councillors Andrews, Mark, Wharton, Gare. Those against? Councillors Scandrett, Turl and Nelson, Whipper, Halstead and McLaughlin. I declare the amendment lost. The amendment now I will now put the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Unanimous, and so that's how it is, unanimous. The development has been approved subject to the alteration, redesign and placement of the chimney fireplace barbecue. 8.3, planning...
Mr Mayor, could I seek a motion to suspend standing orders to bring forward item 11.4? We've got people sitting here patiently.
I would, if that is this gallery here, I assume. Yes, and yes. Well, it is pretty obvious. But I also would like to just pay a little bit of respect to that young lady up there who has been sitting there so well-mannered. No talking, no mucking around. So well done, young lady. You're doing your mother proud. So we have a suspension of standing orders to bring item, what number is it, please?
11.4.
Page
270.
Page 270, which is Heritage Assessment of Aitken Road Barrel Group. So is there a seconder for that?
Yes.
Seconder, Councillor McLaughlin. I will put it. All in favour. Against, carried. I'll ask Councillor Turlin to take the chair as I have a pecuniary interest and am on the JRPP committee.
I've got the gavel, it's all right. I'll just find the page if I can first. What page is it? 270. Yeah, if we can, through the General Manager, we have an introduction in relation to item 11.4, Heritage Assessment of Aitken Road Barrel.
Thank you, and through the chair, sorry, my notes are blowing away. Councillors, in January of this year, Council placed an interim heritage order over land at 25 to 41 Aitken Road in Barrel. The interim heritage order was in response to a development application for a seniors living development at 39 to 41 Aitken Road. And councillors, under the provisions of the Heritage Act, Council can make an interim heritage order where it considers that a potential heritage item may be at risk or under threat, and in this case the DA over land considered to be a potential heritage item triggered the need for the interim heritage order. So Council's Heritage Planner, with the assistance of our Heritage Advisor, has undertaken an assessment of the subject land and the surrounds against the 7 criteria outlined in the New South Wales Heritage Manual. The land forms part of a 1921 subdivision known as the Gulf Links View Estate, and 3 of the 5 dwellings subject to the interim heritage order were built by the prominent local builder Alf Stevens Jr. of Stevens and Sons, and one of the properties contains a cricket pitch that was built for a young Don Bradman to practice. Look, I won't go through the details of the report, it's all outlined in the report itself, but ultimately the assessment determined that 3 of the 5 properties subject to the interim heritage order should be listed as a heritage item under Wingecarribee LEP, and further to that, that the land that made up the Gulf Links View Estate should also be considered for a heritage conservation area under the Wingecarribee LEP.
Questions, Councillor McLaughlin?
Yeah. Look, I was just wondering if our planner might like to make some comments with regard to the presentation that was made earlier. I'm sure you were in the room with regard to the address made earlier on when we're talking about seniors living and why it did not comply and all the arguments that were put up. You might just like to give us a bit of an idea why you assessed that to be as it was. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair. Councillors, the New South Wales Heritage Manual sets out 7 criteria to assess whether an item is
it should be heritage listed or not. You only need to meet one of those 7 criteria. The report goes through each of the 7 criteria individually and provides comments against each of the 7 criteria. Look, it probably doesn't meet all 7, but certainly 3 or 4 of those is certainly an argument to say that it is consistent with 4 or 5 of those criteria.
I can't take my seat. Can you turn my light off? I don't know why it's on. Any other questions, please? Councillor Whipper.
I was just going to move the motion.
Move the motion. Well, I've got a question, if I can, beforehand, if I may, please, to you, and that is that by the recommendation that's been put forward, is this premature prior to the court case that's actually on foot at the moment? Would that not also resolve the issue in the court by the heritage consultants from both sides arguing their point in front of the Land and Environment Court?
Through the chair, look, they are separate processes, and council made an interim heritage order. We, as part of that process, we have 6 months to determine whether or not we believe the item warrants being listed in the LEP. That assessment has now been completed, and the recommendation is that it be listed as a heritage item. It doesn't have to wait for the court to proceed, but it certainly, look, it's ultimately council's determination whether they would prefer it to be determined through the courts.
It will be through the courts anyway.
That's right. That's right. But we have to report back on the interim heritage order. We've done that assessment, and the recommendation is that it warrants being listed as a heritage item.
Correct. Councillor Whipper.
Mr Chair, I'd just like to move the recommendation option 1.
Councillor Whipper moved. Sorry. Well, who wouldn't throw the toss in the air? Councillor.
Well, I think it's a heritage.
Okay, Councillor McLaughlin, you seconded. That's fine.
All right. Okay.
Please carry on.
If I could speak to it, Mr Chair. We did that inspection this morning, and there's no doubt in my mind that it's a significant part of the heritage fabric of Bowral, and I think it is quite responsible for council to move this way and to certainly support that. One of the things that we've seen in the past is the incremental loss of our heritage, and certainly as well the curtilages around those heritage items. So I think it's really important that we send this message out to any potential developers that this is something we really value, particularly our heritage, and we need to protect it. So I'm asking that the council support the recommendation.
Councillor Scandrett.
Councillor Talland, I did legitimately put on my light and say I wanted to second it because I've been involved in this matter for quite a while. From way back, in fact, I did say to some of the people involved in this, in that neighbourhood, that they should speak to Councillor McLaughlin. He was away at the time, and when he returned, I think he gave them a very good hearing.
I wasn't away at the time.
Well, anyway, you. Okay, I'll be. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to. Anyway, I referred them to you, sir, and that was a good move because you had the committee have a good look at it, and we are where we are today. I support this.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, look, it's a very good report, Mr Chair. Look, we heard earlier from Mr Simon Matano with regard to, and some of the arguments he put up were quite relevant. I mean, none of us would not support moving people that want to age in place. And, okay, Annesley has been operating for a lot of years. But if I can suggest to Lend-Lease, they are looking in the wrong direction. Within a small area of that area of Bowral, there are opportunities for Lend-Lease to buy up some land towards Redford Road, Housing Commission area. It's not very far from Annesley, it's just on the other side. This is what Matthew Blissett has done in an area down there, and he's expanded, and council has supported it. But to take an area significant as this is in Bowral and really basically destroy it, councillors, Mr Chairman, that's what it would mean. And I would like to ask the question of Lend-Lease, what happened to the plaque that was put in place, I believe it's been removed, by Mr Ted Springett at Grantham, that where the cricket pitch was, where the young Don practiced, and it wasn't a heritage one, but he went to the trouble of putting a plaque there to say that this is where young Don practiced. Now we know the history from Alf Stevens that this was there. Lend-lease by the land, all of a sudden it disappears. I find that a bit offensive. I find that very offensive. This is our local history, our local history. I'm not against lend-lease, developing and doing things, but this is an area of Bowral, councillors, we'd love to preserve. We need to preserve. It's something that now we've looked at. We've looked at areas in Bowral, conservation areas where between the wars, that we've preserved. We've tried to preserve. They're intact. This area ticked a lot of the boxes. Now, we heard from the objector today, from Lend-Lease, how that we didn't quite match all the criteria and it didn't get a Guernsey as far as heritage. We've heard from our planners that's incorrect. So, councillors, this is something that what we would say to Lend-Lease is we will not support this. Lend-Lease need to go away and look very carefully at where they can do this. Now, we know the state government has brought in legislation that we can put them anywhere. R2, R3, R1, you know, don't worry about that. We can do it, and they will do it, unless we stop them. Thanks.
Councillor Nelson.
I'll be quick, Mr Deputy Mayor. Look, I attended the Heritage Committee meeting last Friday, and it was good to hear from our local experts about their opinions and their advice in regard to heritage. And it was also interesting that we've got 6 nominations for people to stand on the Heritage Committee. We've got, in fact, we're putting a recommendation to extend it by an additional person so that we've got more expertise on the committee. It was also good that we did an inspection today of the buildings because that gave you everyone a visual aspect of what was there, as well as you're seeing the photographs in the report. But this is all about the buildings and the gardens, as opposed to what the objector was talking about. So, and whether there was, we got a name wrong or something, but there's a linkage between these buildings here and what was happening down in Canberra too at the same time. And these buildings are worth keeping, and they should be heritage listed along with the gardens.
Councillor Andrews. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Very briefly, look, I'm not all that certain that all 3 of the buildings should be listed, but most definitely, I support the motion, by the way, most definitely the properties with their landscaping, etc., most definitely should, so I'll be supporting the motion.
So before I put the motion, I'll say a few words. And the thing that concerns me is that if it was that worthy of putting into a conservation zone, it should have been done years ago when the LEP was done in 2010 and so on. We now get to a point where somebody's purchased land, regardless if they're a multi-million-dollar company, and then we find out, well, we don't like that. We might change our mind. That's what frustrates me. Now, we've had the briefing from council staff and they explained they can't do it all. But this has been known, it's coming through for quite a while through the public. The public have known that. And the council staff have probably known for meetings that they've had with the developer. But at the end of the day, you can't keep moving the gateposts. Notwithstanding that, I agree with where you're going on it, but at the same time, we need to be more proactive. You can't keep changing the goalposts. Without the studies being totally done, what we've got is a chance here where nobody's been inside these buildings and it's all an external view saying that's got heritage value. And when a heritage report's done, it will be so thick and it will be presented to the court, and the court will make the decision between both qualified heritage architects, because none of us are qualified to make that decision. Not even council staff are. Maybe one of their qualified consultants might be, but nobody's been in the buildings. My view is probably the trees and the gardens have more heritage value than probably some of the buildings. As you said, 3 of the buildings have got no heritage. They're more a Camborian sort of rendered Spanish tiled roof thing. And we don't know how many alterations have happened in these buildings because nobody's been part of it yet. So are we preempting something? You know, that's what concerns me, that we make a decision on the run. It now has to be resolved tonight. We are already in the court in relation to this heritage interim order, and we're already in court for the failure of complying with the DA after 60 days. So there's 2 court cases fighting in this at the moment. And the heritage order, the heritage interim order, might just get beaten in the court regardless of what happens here tonight. So, regardless of where I vote tonight, I just still think we shouldn't be changing the gatepost, no matter who it might be. Because any of those houses we class as heritage, if they lodged a DA to put a skillion roof on the back of it, which we just went through in Throsby Park, and a chimney to the side, would we approve it? If they wanted to pull the roof off and do a 2-storey section, would we approve it? We probably would, because there was no interim heritage order on any of those buildings. But now we've tied them in knots. So I would imagine if it doesn't go forward, and the court will make that decision, and they all get sold to individual owners, every one of those owners then are going to have trouble doing an extension in place because we have put a heritage order on each of those houses. No, you need to make sure that we know what we're doing, and I believe, anyway, we're stuck with what's in front of us, so we'll put the recommendation. There is no other motion. All in favour of the recommendation, please raise your hand.
Need to name them out.
Well, it's unanimous. I'll come back to this. It's been in the previous DA. I just want to make one point if I can. No, well, I will. Okay, well, we need to bring this forward later because it's not right. Councillor Mayor can come in again, unless there's another one.
Is this what?
Mr Mayor said the Mayor can come in again.
Oh, you said unless there's another?
Oh, he was talking about 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what the other one is.
No.
I'll find it in that you're saying you're right, I can't mention it.
You can't.
What page? Okay, thank you, councillors. We're on page 8. We're on item number 8.3, which is on page 97. Councillors, we stopped live streaming at 7:30. We are on item number 3. Or now we are moving to item number 4. So
I'm happy to move the recommendation. Let's get going.
Okay. So Mr Scott Lee will address council on behalf of the applicant in relation to 8.3, planning proposal to rezone land at Yarra Road, Moss Vale. Mr Lee? Was it interim order or what?
Okay. Thank you, councillors. Like most planning proposals, this matter has a long history. In this case, it's tied to the adjoining lands that everyone knows as Chelsea Gardens, Kumunji. Chelsea Gardens, Kumunji is now zoned low-density residential and is being prepared for residential development. Council has in fact placed on exhibition the required development control plan that will provide a structure for the future residential development of this land. Our planning proposal asks only for consistency in the land use zoning for the 3 adjoining lots, all of which were concessional lots born out of the original Chelsea Gardens Kumunji holdings. Excuse me. There should be no question in councillors' minds that these lots should be, and in fact will be, zoned residential. As made clear in our planning proposal submission and made clear in the staff report, these lots have been identified by both the council and the Department of Planning as requiring a zoning amendment consistent with Chelsea Gardens Kumunji. In fact, these property owners have been invited to come forward and request that change. I believe the councillors have been provided with information that confirms that. Their potential rezoning is identified in the Moss Vale Township Precinct Plan that's part of the local planning strategy. The real question is not if, but when. These lands were not part of the Chelsea Gardens Comungie proposal, not because of any strategic planning reason. It was simply a question of land ownership at the time. The owners of Chelsea Gardens were allowed to lodge their proposal without inclusion of these 3 properties, but as noted already, Council, the Joint Planning Panel and the Department of Planning all acknowledged that these properties should be included. That was over 5 years ago. The staff report correctly points out there are some challenges associated with services and infrastructure on a broad scale. This is always the case with land release areas, and it is for Chelsea Gardens Comungie. There's significant challenges, but solutions will be found. The real challenge, however, for Council is to provide the best chance for a coordinated consideration and response to those issues, and this is best done by including these lands now, not having them languishing on the sidelines. As they say, it's better to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. It must also be acknowledged by Council that we're talking about 70 or so additional lots on top of the 1,200 already being provided by Chelsea Gardens. 6% increase. Staff report would have you believe that because the land is not part of the identified urban release area, this decision cannot be made at this time. That's not so. If the rezoning is supported, the land can be included onto the urban release area map, which is simply a layer in the LEP. In doing so, it would then bind them, as Chelsea Gardens has been bound up, into being part of a DCP and the infrastructure planning that is required by Part 6 of the LEP. That is strategic planning, and it's happening now. Deferring the decision to include these lands is just that, putting it off, which is, in this case, the opposite of strategic planning, and completely unfair to the property owners that have been encouraged to come forward to be part of the planning process. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Lee, we were both somewhere else today, so I didn't catch up with that, unfortunately. But you do say that Council had contacted the owners and asked them to put in an application. So that had happened, and it did happen in relevant time. There wasn't a hold up there.
That was some time ago. That was when as I said at the beginning, there's a long history of Chelsea Gardens. A lot of councillors here are very much aware of it all. So these things don't happen overnight. When that was being considered in earlier stages, the council, at the prompting more, I believe, of the planning panel and the department, said these lands are really part of this area. They should be part of it. Council wrote to the landowners and said, you should come forward, and put I'll throw your hat in the ring, I suppose, for want of a better term. And that was some time ago, and for various reasons it didn't happen straight away, but it's happening. We've done it now in accordance with Council's process. So the recommendation to defer it is I think, difficult from the property owner's point of view to accept, having been invited to make it, but it doesn't make any sense in terms of the reasons why you shouldn't make that change now. The planning for that area has been undertaken now. It's important for these lands to be part of that, because that will help with the long-term solutions of all those infrastructure issues. And it's going to make it a lot easier for these property owners to be able to deal with those, rather than trying to then deal with them all again in isolation.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Councillor Turland.
Look, it's been proposed that potentially what we could do, Council could give an undertaking to complete the Wingecarribee local housing strategy by the end of this year. Would that be acceptable to you?
Short answer, no. I mean, because the council has that obligation in any event.
I understand that, but would 6 months?
Well, that's
the question.
That's your answer.
No, sorry. If I just elaborate on that answer, our request, our desire would be to have it dealt with right now. If the council said to the property owners, "Well, we'll do it in 6 months," at least that places them a step forward, because there is a little bit more certainty. Being left completely in limbo is absolutely unacceptable.
I'll move an amendment if I can.
We're not.
No other questions.
No other questions? Then, thank you, Mr. Lee. Thanks very much. And I'm going to ask for a introduction, please, from council staff, because I've reversed it again and because I went to the wrong page. But I'll ask Ms. Susan Stannard to give an introduction, then take questions.
Thank you, Mr.
Mayor, through the chair. Just to clarify, the history is that the Joint Regional Planning Panel did review the Chelsea Gardens Kumunji application. And as part of supporting that, the department recommended that we contact not just these 3 property owners, but a number of property owners on the periphery of Chelsea Gardens Kumunji to see if they were interested in being considered for a future urban release area. And with one exception, they all said yes, they would be interested. So we're not just dealing with these 3, we're actually dealing with about 7 or 8 properties. So that moved through the local strategic planning, or the local planning strategy, with a recommendation that we review that whole matter when Chelsea Gardens Kumunji was determined. So it was determined, and it's quite possible that we would consider looking at an extension of the urban release area there. But all evening I've been listening to concerns about character and infrastructure and suitability of the location of different urban release areas and different forms of development. And the local housing strategy, the character statements and the local strategic planning statement are all intended to provide a strategic framework around all of those issues, so that hopefully as we go forward we can identify suitable areas for housing that have been addressed in terms of all of those concerns. We do have to have the local strategic planning statement completed by the 1st of July next year. It's in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act that we do so. We've already started the local housing strategy. I know this has been a matter that's been ongoing for many years now, but really from a strategic perspective, the staff have to put the recommendation that the best way to proceed is to just wait until we do finish that work under the local housing strategy, consider all sites, not just around Chelsea Gardens Kumunji, but across the entire Shire, where there are opportunities or where there aren't opportunities because of certain constraints, and make decisions on that basis, rather than always making decisions because someone's put an application in asking to be rezoned. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Turley?
Well, the DCP that's just gone through with Kumunji Chelsea Gardens, will that not set the pace for the rest of these 3 blocks of land?
Mr Park's probably best for the DCP controls. They're
Mr. Park?
still on exhibition.
The question is that the work in the DCP that's out of public exhibition now on Chelsea Kumunji, will that not set the pace in relation to that's a DCP? Will that not set the pace for those 3 blocks of land?
Through the chair, look, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by set the pace, but in terms of the planning proposal that's before us, what we are finding through the detailed work that's being undertaken as part of the DCP, as well as the infrastructure assessment that will form part of the DA, is that I am yet to be convinced that there is satisfactory infrastructure to support the amount of zone land that's currently there, let alone extending that. And I think it is our role to ensure that we are zoning land that can be developed, and until I'm convinced that we can even develop the land that's zoned, I'm not in a position to recommend that we support any additional zoning. And I don't think there's anything in the planning proposal that convinces me any further, other than to say that the land next door is being developed, so there will be adequate infrastructure and services, because I'm not yet 100% convinced that the next door will be fully developed without major infrastructure upgrades that council certainly can't afford.
Well, sort of half didn't answer the question, but anyway.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you.
Quick question,
Yeah,
Councillor
quick question, Ms Stannard. Look, I believe that these blocks were concessional blocks from Chelsea Kumunji Gardens, and I did hear what you said with regard to not just dealing with these 3 but another 7 or what have you around them. But considering that these were concessional lots from that land, does that not give it, and we're only talking about 70 on top of 1,200, doesn't that make sense to do it now, as Mr Lee pointed out?
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Ms Stannard?
My professional opinion is that that's not relevant at all. We're dealing today with what we have in front of us today, trying to do the best we can with that for the future. So what we had in the past is not particularly relevant in this case.
Thank you. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, question for staff, and that is, we've just heard that the housing strategy will be completed hopefully within 6 months. Could we have a confirmation that is a real target at a management level, and also that the strategy is going to include these three?
Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment on that. It may well be a target, but as councillors were told during the review of the business paper, there are other factors in relation to completion of the housing strategy that will be the departments up to then. So we can try our best to do our bit by the end of the year. That's all I think we can say.
Thank you, Madam General Manager. Any more questions to Ms Stannard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If I may quote, please, and I'll very quickly lead into a question from one of the persons representing one of the owners, and I think it is pertinent that it does appear, and I'm yet to be corrected, that they have been disadvantaged. And I quote, if the infrastructure planning for these parcels is not considered with the Chelsea Gardens Kumunji URA, we fear that adding to it at a later date may increase the cost, and we all know what they're inferring with costs substantially, or even be made not possible. Now, can you just offer an opinion on that statement? Because, I think these people, whether they're in the room or not, need to know if this thing's deferred, how long is it going to be deferred? And I know you can't give an
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Ms Stannard?
We're doing everything in our power to get things moving. We've already started, and this is our highest priority. One of the things that prevents us from really getting on with it is that we constantly do receive planning proposals that need to be addressed. What has become immediately apparent when we've looked at a number of planning proposals that have come out of the local planning strategy is that the infrastructure is not there to support them. It's not. Then we start then to be asked questions by the Water New South Wales as to how we're going to provide adequate infrastructure to meet their needs. It's impossible for me to say how this will all pan out, but the fact that we have contacted all of those owners, we do recognise that there is potential there, means that we will be exploring those options as best we can as part of the local housing strategy.
Thank you. No more questions?
No, but I'll move the amendment if I can.
Okay, thank you, Ms Stannard. Okay, woo, please. Councillor Turlin, do you have the floor? What are you
Thank you. Well, the
moving?
amendment is exactly what's there as the motion, but added to it,
No, there's no point of order.
I want to second Councillor Whipper's.
I'm sorry, Councillor Whipper hasn't got a light on. Councillor Turlin has.
It's up there.
He has moved from way back.
Listen to me.
Then, no, I don't really either, and I wonder why. Councillor,
Thank you.
you have the right to move an amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. That Council complete the Wingecarribee local housing strategy by the end of this year, 2019. At the timeline. We actually talked about that. Anyway, I won't debate it yet. I'll let that go up.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Must complete it. Councillor Halstead. So, do you wish to speak to your amendment, or do you wish to speak to your motion? Okay, Councillor Whipper. You can foreshadow a motion.
I'll foreshadow.
No, just leave it there at the
Leave it
moment.
there, okay.
Councillor Whipper.
Good. I got the light.
Councillor Whipper has the light. He's speaking to his motion.
Oh, good. I've got the light. Funny how that works. Councillors, look, I think this is really, in terms of strategic thinking, this is the way forward. I'll wait. I'll take up some of the time until the councillors are listening. Thank you. I think we've listened to our council planners, and I support them fully. We need to do this strategically and look at the big picture. I mean, we're pressured all the time, into sort of jumping to conclusions that don't always fit into the bigger scheme of things. That's a real concern to me.
We know, we spoke earlier about IHAPs and how everybody else in every other shire is being overridden, well, council's being overridden, and basically the market is approving those developments. We've got a really unique opportunity here, councillors, to determine what we want our shire to be and how we're going to sort of incorporate, proper infrastructure into those developments, where we want them, what we want our villages and our towns to look like, and where we've got a message from the government that they're prepared to listen to that. So we've got to get it right. So why wouldn't we wait strategically to put all the pieces of the jigsaw together before we race off making any conclusions? And it may well be that this seems obvious, that this is just a little piece of the puzzle that needs to fit into Chelsea and Kumunji as well. But you might remember, councillors, we didn't necessarily want Chelsea Kumunji. It was dumped on us. So, I mean, really, we've got an opportunity here to do it right, and for the whole shire, not just, for the sake of this development. So, councillors, I think we really do need to take the time to listen to our staff, to work with them, not against them. And as been said, the planning department will regulate a lot of this anyway. We might put timeframes on it, but really, how long did it take us to put our LEP in place? There's a few of us here that remember that. So I think we have to be realistic. If it's due by the end of this year or early January, I have no doubt we'll do our best. So what's that, 6 months, maybe? Look, councillors, I think we need to do this properly and do it once, rather than this knee-jerk reaction and feeling the breath of developers down our neck. I don't think we should. Oh, geez, I felt the breath then. Hey, geez.
Councillor Whipper.
I rest my case.
May I make a suggestion to somebody who's moving one of these recommendations, that the strategy is not going to be complete in any time frame if we keep accepting spot rezonings.
I've got want to put a number 2 in the motion.
So think about that, because there is no problem trying to put a time frame on it. But if you put a time frame on it and then still get applications, we're not going to go anywhere. So, and then maybe a report come back to council in relation to what I feel is councils have concerns with, and that is how long and before, and Mr Lee made the comment, as long as there is some sort of timeline. But to be definitive, I think could be a bit hard. So Councillor Turland and then Councillor Nelson. So you're speaking for?
My amendment.
Okay, you're speaking against the motion for
That's
the
it.
amendment.
Look, in 2015, the 4th of November, council writes to one of the applicants there, which is their house, not a developer, it's their house. There's 3 houses there. People live there a long time in their lives there, I believe. I'm writing to invite you to register your interest. Exactly that. They didn't come to council and say, please.
Councillor Turner.
We actually went to them and said, and it goes on to say, it was also identified in the 2010 LEP that land would be potentially used for a subdivision or rezoning down the path. So it's been going on since 2010 in theory. It had been allocated of a spot that could go, Kumunji, Chelsea Gardens, other places around the Shire. So to say that these people have been tapping on the door the whole time, no, we went to them and said, please, we'd like you to come to us. And that's how it worked. The Joint Regional Planning Panel, it went to them and they approved it. It then came back to council, and it was council through the political wings of a few councillors to stop it, who sold their souls. And we stopped it. And what happened? The government said, no, look, in 2010 you said you allocated this land for a greenfield site. And what happened? We in council, council knocked it back. Sorry, we knocked it back. And here we are, all the people, all these 3 owners who live on the site, they're not developers, they just want reassurance that something's going to happen, because this just goes on and on and on in time frame. I don't accept the excuse that we've got all these other subdivisions. This one is in front of us now. We have a DCP that's just gone through the mill, which shows the standard and the types of the roads and the trees and the bushes and the type of houses and the covenants and the 88B instruments. It's all there now. So it was a logical time. It should have been done before this DCP went out, that they were locked into it. It would have been so simple, done and dusted. But it has to be. You know, the government has said they're going to take it out of our hands again. We have to provide sites. And this is only 50 to 70 blocks, I understand. Now, I also understand that we've been told by, I think, at one of the briefings from the guys from Kumunji, this is a 10 to 15 year development. It's not going to happen overnight like Campbelltown, where they knock out 3,000 homes overnight. This is a 10 to 15 year subdivision. And we're adding another 50 to 70 homes on it. Probably, I don't see that's going to put too much stress on the whole process. And as for the infrastructure of the roads and that, the RMS have a commitment to fix Illawarra Highway and through Moss Vale, regardless of this. But yes, you're right, the government approved this over council's view, but then they have no means of actually fixing their own problem, which is the Illawarra Highway, which they need to. And that motion's still on the book, asking the RMS and the politicians to come up and talk to us how they're going to fix it, and they don't even want to come near us. Again, that's the way it is. But what we've got at the moment is 3 people who live on these sites for many, many years asking for clarity because they don't want it to drag on forever and a day. Now, I don't think if I put up an amendment not to defer it, that wouldn't go anywhere. All I'm saying is let's bring it to a timeline, because we cannot just keep dragging on and on. And regardless of what else is through the Shire that's going on, this is what's in front of us. This relates to these 3 blocks of land. It doesn't relate to all the other ones that have been put out there that might or might not happen.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to see if the mover and seconder of the motion would accept the number 2 point, which I'll just read it quickly. That the General Manager prepare a report to a future meeting of Council in relation to not accepting any further rezonings for housing development until the housing strategy is completed. Now, happy with that? So it goes.
I'd ask one thing, Councillor, and that is hopefully, or ideally, or something like that, within 6 months, just to give an indication to the public. That's all.
Well, it's not relevant. We can, that's still. I take your point, Councillor Scandal. I'll even agree with you on this one, but we can't put it in. Will you accept that, Councillor Whipper?
Could we?
Okay. Can you please, Mr. Wilton? Can you please take the right or from Mr. Nelson to get it up on the board, please?
6 months, because it's now July.
Councillor Nelson. Okay, you can speak to Councillor Nelson, or so that's been accepted, right? You speaking for or against?
For the amendment?
For the amendment.
Sorry, for the motion, sorry, against the amendment.
Then that, Councillor, I wanted to speak for the motion.
For the amendment.
For the amendment?
Yep. Look, I'm happy to support that. I think what Councillor Turlin actually stated makes a lot of sense. I was going to move, actually, option 2, which said it went straight to the gateway, but I'll leave that. I think that time frame is good. And as you say, these people aren't developers.
Through here, Councillor.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. These are residents that have been asked before. And while you're doing all that planning and putting in infrastructure to deal with 1,200 homes, and you've got concessional lots that originally came from this land that abut that land, why you wouldn't include that? You know, I appreciate what our staff have said. It's, you know, you can't do this one without looking at that one, but I think in this case, these people need some assurance that where they're going with this, because they're not developers, they're just people that live there on concessional allotments, and that they need to be, I believe, incorporated into what's happening now. Councillor Turl's right. This is not happening overnight. It's a 15-year program. But if it's done now, and we heard from Mr Lee saying it really should be done now, but if we give it a time frame so that the owners there have got some assurity that they have been accepted, it is going forward and it will be dealt with.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. For the motion. Who's for the motion? Councillor Scan.
Mr Mayor, yes, look, I was representing Council on the JRPP through all of this, and Council had a definitive position on this, but that was then. And now we have an approval, which we have to work with from state government, and we have to get the best outcome. And I believe that getting the best outcome is to make sure that we do include these 3 blocks in that, but we've got to have that as part of the whole housing strategy. So I'm quite happy with that addition that Councillor Nelson has put forward, and the fact that we are talking 6 months, not end of year, Councillor Tillman, because quite frankly, come December, it's then February, and the whole thing just can't happen in that time. So it really needs a sort of a 6-month period to get there, but maybe a bit more. The staff have given us assurances that they'll give their best efforts. The GM has echoed those, so to bring the whole thing together. But I do think we've got to put a line in the sand. I'm talking to Councillor Nelson.
No, you're not. You talk to the chair or the camera.
Okay. But I'm talking to Councillor Nelson, drawing a line in the sand in terms of proposals coming in. Mr Mayor, it's timely. We did that last term. It's timely because then the staff can actually move forward in a cohesive manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Halstead.
Yes, look, I'm voting for the amendment and against the motion. I'll be very quick. We need a performance indicator for the senior management, and that's what's in the amendment. By the end of the year, we've had doubts, we may get there, we may not. People in this community are sick of everything going into the black hole, nothing coming out of it. I'm not trying to be derogatory there, but that's the terminology I heard only in the last week, which I thought, gee, that might be relevant, a bit harsh, but anyway, in terms of the option 2, no, I wouldn't go along with that as it is, and I think anyone that is even involved with it maybe not understand just how clear that is, but I wouldn't step out of the frame of being responsible, but not only that, having my principles still in place, and that is that whilst we've got Chelsea Comungie, which we didn't want, I can assure you the elected councillors that day did not want it. We've got it, so it's a fact of life, it's a real thing, it's a zoning. My God, when I look at that map, as a planner, forgetting about anything else I say, why wouldn't those 3 have been in it? You can look at all the others you like on here, Mr Mayor, right? Another thrown in to just show us off the straight and narrow. But you look at this one here and you say, why would that not have been in it? It's probably because the 3 people weren't involved as developers with the other 2 or whatever it was on the much larger tract of land. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but to me, there's a lot of common sense in the moment for going for that amendment, and that is get on with the job. Tell the community you're actually going to do it by the end of the year. Not we may, we'll try, and geez, it might be next July, because I heard that come out just earlier on. July was mentioned, we might, I don't know who it was that said it, but they said, we'll strive and we'll do this, that and the other, and we'll certainly make sure that, hopefully we'll get there by July. It's not good enough. So to me, that's totally appropriate, the amendment.
Okay, then I'm going to support the recommendation. We are asking for a report to come back to council because the big thing is if the amendment doesn't say anything about keep on accepting rezoning, spot rezonings. This to me should be the line in the sand. We don't take any more so the staff can achieve the completion. It's just not fair that these keep coming in when we haven't got the strategy complete. Picking in isolation, and I agree, this to me, I support the recommendation that, or would support the subdivision, these 3 blocks, because as Councillor Halstead pointed out, it it just melds in. But you set a precedent if you just do it tonight without going through the proper strategy. And that strategy is that it has to pass the criteria. Because remember that the land coming out Yarra Road on the right-hand side was asked to be subdivided as well. So what are you going to do if they come back in again? Well, you've done these three up the road on a spot rezoning. Why won't you do mine?
Make a stand.
We invited over there at Colavale, McLaughlin Group. He spent $40,000, and Mr. Lee knows this. He spent $40,000 in doing an environmental impact statement for council because we invited him, because we said, we will support you with, we want to consider your land, but you'll have to do this statement. And he did it and council knocked him back. So nothing is certain in planning, but let's go through the proper process. And as it says, in therefore including in isolation, in individual planning proposed in isolation, is both compromising the outcomes of both the local housing strategy and the local strategic planning statement. We are priding ourselves, councillors, on trying to get our planning instrument right, and compromising it by trying to do that. And I agree with the sentiment that you're trying to do, Councillor Turlin, but what happens if council staff can't do it? What are you going to do? Let's just aim for that. Stop any more DAs coming in, any more spot rezoning applications coming in until we have dealt with what we can deal with. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the indulgence of, I'm talking about the amendment. If possible, could they agree to placing point 2 of the motion also as point 3 in the amendment?
Yeah, you could do that.
If that's possible, if they agree.
Yep. Happy to. Yeah, look, I just want to make a point, Mr. Mayor, and I think I've got the right to do this.
Clarification?
Well, clarification is, you had a shot at that amendment before this change on the basis that we were looking at the housing strategy. It's in there. I hope you see that.
No, Councillor, no, I'll clarify. My problem is trying to put a time frame on something, and we haven't stopped taking in new spot rezonings. That's my problem. Councillor Andrews.
Well, thank you. We've included that now. Look, I think it's important. I'm not expecting the staff to achieve that, but it'd be nice if they have a go at achieving it. There should be some time frame. Look, seriously, I'm no genius here, but it does appear these people have been inconvenienced, possibly, and please, that's why I support the amendment. There's no harm in leaving the 6 months in or the end of 2019. If they don't achieve it, we cop it.
Councillor Turlin.
Look, this is not a...
Right of reply. No, this is the amendment, so who moved it? Councillor Whipper.
No, I moved the amendment.
No, you're speaking to the amendment now.
Yes.
Councillor Whipper has the right of reply to the motion.
Do you want to go first?
No, you have to go first.
Thank you very much. This has been going on since 2010. Town Council came to these people, all of them, and said, we would like to invite you to be involved. This has not been going on for 3 or 4 weeks or 3 or 4 years. It's been going on since 2010. That's what I understand from the LEP. But then formal letters went out in 2015 saying we would like you to consider if you would like to. Now, and I understand staff's under pressure, but these affects people's lives. They need certainty. And it wasn't that they came to us, like you're saying other people are going to do, other property owners, saying we want you to rezone our land. We went to them and said, please, we'd like to consider you in this big picture. This big picture that we then we then knocked it back and was overruled by the JRPP approved it, then we knocked it back, and then it came back through the state government to overrule us. If we don't go forward on this tonight, I can sue the state government. One complaint from these 3 owners when we went to them and said, please, they're going to jump over us again. Now, the second part of the motion, or the third part in relation to the amendment, is quite clear, and I agree with that's probably good. We don't take any more, takes the pressure off the staff. I don't know how many they've got on the books. I think we heard about 8 or 9, whatever's floating around at the moment. But I don't know how many of those 8 or 9 we actually went out to them and say, please, we want you involved. And therefore they need to be dealt with first. This is what this relates to. This whole motion in front of us at the moment relates to this land, not other people's land, not other councils' problems trying to resolve other planning proposal. It relates to these 3 blocks of land. I don't know why we're complicating all the others when this is what's in front of us here tonight. So the amendment, obviously I support. We've added, as Councillor Andrews put in there, that we don't consider any new rezonings until this one's been completed. That's a good move, but we need to put a time on it. Can't go on forever.
Councillor Markwart.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm aware of the time and I won't speak for very long here. Basically, just like to say I'll be supporting the motion. I'm just concerned we're putting more and more pressure on council staff, giving them more work to do. We need to let them get on with it. They clearly have got the message of what we're looking at here. I believe the best thing we can do is to give them the reins and let them run, rather than holding them back, giving them more regulations and more rules and more targets to meet. Let them go. If they don't meet the job, well, they'll hear about it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I've spoken other than just to say putting a time frame. That is what staff told us today. Councillor Whipper. Right of reply.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, either or, there's very little difference between these motions. The only thing is the amendment does put, I think, undue pressure on staff. I don't think that's right. The fact that an invitation may have been given before we had the opportunity to look at the housing strategy, I think is irrelevant. I'm just asking you, councillors, just to reflect on the realistic pressure you may be putting on council staff. I don't think that's right. You look at these, they're almost identical, except one has got the stick hanging over the staff's head, the other is allowing them a little bit of time to produce quality outcomes. So I'll leave it at that, Mr Mayor.
All right, thank you. I put the amendment as moved by Councillor Turland. All in favour? Councillors McLaughlin, Halstead, Andrews and Turland. Those against the amendment? Councillors Scandrett, Nelson, Whipper, Markwart and Gare. I declare the amendment lost. I now put the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett, Nelson, Andrews, Whipper, Markwart and Gare. And those against, Councillors Turland, Halstead and McLaughlin. We now move on to 10.1, Post-Exhibition Report, Proposed Lease 1A Rainbow Street, page 134.
So moved.
Moved. It's out on exhibition. The only thing that
I think there were some additions that needed to be made in terms of the committee. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Have we got that up?
Yeah, if I may, Mr Mayor, those changes have been now reflected in the resolution.
Okay, can councillors read that recommendation, please? Yeah. He's going to get his flu shot next year, councillors.
Yeah.
Okay, we happy with that? That's the makeup of the committee. Number 3. Okay, so the business paper doesn't reflect.
So,
Councillor Whipper.
If I could, Mr Mayor, just in point number 3, within the brackets, that should read members set at 8 positions, 2 of those being set for traditional elders. Yeah. Traditional Gundungara elders, I think we should put. Yeah. Apart from that,
everything's fine?
Yeah.
Can we specify that, elders?
Yeah.
Sorry, just elders, is that fine? Or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, can I ask councillors please to keep it brief? Councillor Scandal.
I have an amendment, Mr Mayor. And that is the motion as you see it there with 2 extra points.
Councillor Whipper and Councillor Markward. Did you second that, Councillor Markward?
I'm happy to.
Yes. Okay, Councillor Scandrett, amendment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And that is the additional item 6, to say that the term of the lease, sorry, it needs to change number 2 to 21 years.
Thank you. Is there anything else other than that alteration?
And number 6, that the
Number 6.
property be returned to community zoning as it was prior to 2010.
Do you have a seconder?
I'm seeing if I have.
No seconder?
Sorry, did you say yes?
No seconder, lapses for the want of a seconder. There's no other amendment, then I put the recommendation. All in favour? Councillor Markward.
If I could briefly just speak to the motion, just very brief.
Yes, seeing you're on the committee,
Thank
as
you very
the
much.
hands go up, you put your light off.
I was too slow. I am a bit slow. I support the motion, which is to put this on exhibition. I'd just like to make the point that I would like to hear from the community in response to this going on exhibition. If they do want 21 years or other changes, they should write in and make that point. I will certainly be sympathetic to reducing that term, but it depends on what the community says. I want to hear from them in the next 28 days. Thank you.
Thank you. No, that's a fair point, and I mean, I've made the relevant comment as well. Put the recommendation. No, I'm closing closing it down because I asked, and he was on the committee and actually had his light on as the hands went up. You didn't have a seconder. I
want to debate this, Mr Mayor.
I'm sorry, Councillor Scandrett. It was.
We're in debate, Mr Mayor.
No. I put the recommendation. I'm putting the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your hands. Carried. Then we move on to 10 point.
Mr Mayor.
You can object all you
Please
like. I object to you, Councillor Scandrett.
Please record my...
Yes, put his name there against it. 10.2, request to be appointed as Trust Manager for Crown Reserve Tourist Road Oval. Move Councillor Nelson, seconded Councillor Halstead. Councillor Whipper, do you have a...
No, it's the next one.
No, you're one ahead of us, okay. Put it, all in favour. Those against, carried. 10.3, Mount Gibraltar Heritage Reserve, update on property matters. Councillor Whipper.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move a motion. I've also added to that motion an additional 3 points, which are up there. If I do have a seconder, I can speak very... Thank you.
Okay, speak to it, Councillor Whipper.
I'll do that very briefly, Mr Mayor. I think the best way forward with this, we all realise how complex this is, the Mount Gib, but we also know that it's been around for a long, long time. We also appreciate the energy and the efforts of the Mount Gibraltar Committee, now the Bush Care Group, and I think the best way forward is to note the complexity of the issues, but to also convene a meeting with the appropriate staff and representatives from the Bush Care Land Care Group and move forward from there, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Then no debate, put the recommendation, all in favour. Those against, carried. We move to page 173, 10.5, Illawarra Academy of Sport, request for review.
168, Mr Mayor.
Oh, we've got one little one.
I'll move that, Mr
Proposed council lease for the new Berrima Community Centre from Boral Limited, 10.4, move Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Nelson. Any discussion? Put it, all in favour. Those against, carried. 10.5, page 173. Now it's the Illawarra Academy of Sport requesting review of annual funding. Councillor Nelson.
I've got a recommendation. I'd like to put up
Councillor Nelson.
That council support the request made by the Illawarra Academy of Sport for an additional $2,000 in its 2019-20 financial year, and that the matter be referred to the September quarterly review to allocate the funds. And Councillor Turlin probably second that. Is that right?
I'll second. Councillor Andrews has seconded.
Second.
Okay, so be supported. The reasoning, well, you will speak to it.
Yeah, look, I'm just concerned that Mr Armstrong, that is the general manager there, look, someone needs to tell him that we prepare our budgets in February each year, and if the AIS want additional funding, they should notify us in February. And it's not the first time they've done it, Mr Mayor, because when I was working here, the same thing happened. You know, so our chairman should have a little talk to them.
Then, Councillor Nelson, you could put in there as point B.
No, I won't. I won't. I'll let the chairman take that back informally, Mr Mayor.
You mean our council delegate?
Yes.
Well, I'm the delegate. He's my authorised representative.
Oh, right. Okay. I thought Councillor Turlin was. Anyway, Councillor's running a deficit of $123,000 at the moment, so this $2,000 is going to jump on top of that. No doubt we'll find the funds in the operational budget, but it will be at a cost. So while we support this, we'd like them to get their act into gear.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Turlin.
Yeah, can I just ask one question to start to Mr Paul before we in debate? Is that on page 173, we actually already provide $3,100 in support to use the local gym, plus the $10,100. Am I correct?
Through you.
Well, it's not a direct cash contribution, but it's a lost opportunity cost, I guess, for the use of that facility there. So yes, it is a cost to council.
So it's a cost to council.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yes.
So I'm going to move option 2, because they're already getting $3,100 more than a request of an increase, which no other council is doing. So they're already getting the $10,100 plus in kind or cost to council, the community, so that those kids can use the local facility that we own across the road here in Moss Vale. If I'm correct, that would make it $5,100 on top of the 10 we're giving, if we give another 2,000. We only have 16 students there at this point in time. We've had up to 22 some other times. Mathematics between 22 and 10,000, you can do the maths yourself. 16 at the moment with 10 grand, we're doing pretty good with the per student.
Do you have a seconder for your amendment, Councillor Scandrett?
Don't know. Anyway, so I just think that another 2,000 is too much. And I've been on the Royal Academy Sport for many years now, except for now. And I think we're paying $3,100 already on top, which is noted here, but it really is now $13,200 we're actually paying already. So that is my view, because that was a motion I put through last year, and a couple of years I've been asking for that money for the gym use, only the gym use. So I think we're well catering for them.
Councillor Andrews.
Will not hold you up, Mr Mayor. Very simply, the $2,000, yeah, all councils on the South Coast are matching that. Unfortunately, the state government, I think I'm certain it's the end of this year, they're withdrawing their funding, or the majority of their funding to these academies. Barwon, for instance, they believe it'll close down because of it. So they're under a bit of stress. But yeah, I'm supporting Councillor Turlin, but that's probably the reason they need a bit of help.
Thank you very much. Councillor Scandrett.
I'll just second Councillor Turlin.
Okay, Councillor Mark Wood.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. I won't be supporting this motion. I believe we have other organisations which represent the community more, and I'd rather money went there. Council has a bucket of money from the ratepayers. It's not our money, it's the ratepayers' money. It's not, I don't think it's appropriate that we should actually decide where this sort of money goes for such a small representation of the community. I'd rather the money was spread broader across the community, so I won't be supporting this. At a previous council meeting, I was called stingy, and I can't remember the other term, but something very similar. So I'm sure it will come up again. I think I heard the word here, and that's fine. I don't mind. I'd rather a ratepayers' money went something that was looking after the less advantaged and the broader selection of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Final wrap up, please, Councillor.
Just quickly, Mr Mayor, in the report here it says that there hasn't been an increase requested from the Academy for some time, a number of years. So we're only playing catch up at the moment. And look, the effort that the IAS puts in and the opportunity it gives our local kids, our sports people, the opportunity to participate at a higher level and get that training is worthwhile the money.
Yeah. If they had their CPI adjustments, they probably we wouldn't be asking for it. So I put the amendment is moved by Councillor Turland. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillors Whipper, Halstead, McLaughlin, Turland and Scandrett. Those against, Councillors Mark Ward, Andrews and Nelson. I declare... Do you want me to put the motion again? Okay, resubmit the voting. Those in favour of the amendment. Councillors McLaughlin, Mark Ward, Halstead, Whipper, Turland and Scandrett. Those against, Nelson, Andrews and Gare. I declare the amendment now becomes the motion. Put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your hand. Same way, same against.
Mr Mayor, just on that, just a quick point. Can you write a letter to the state government explaining our position and complaining they shouldn't pull the funding?
No. Can we move to 10.6 Wingecarribee Adult Daycare Centre? Councillor Turland.
Option 2.
Okay, Councillor Turland is moving option 2, which is on page 182.
See the kids over there. I'll tell them.
What we give them? $3,000 worth.
I'll tell them you didn't give them $2,000.
Draft a new agreement on the basis there be no fixed repayment schedule and a default interest arrangement. So can you get up that, please?
Amendment, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Scandrett. Who seconded Councillor Turland? That is option 2 on page 182.
Okay. Right, well, mine is
No, please, Councillor Scandrett, will you resume your seat until you have the right? Does Councillor Turland have a seconder? Then he lapses for the want of a seconder. Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, option 3. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for option 3?
Option 3.
On page 182.
And I would be adding the rider to that the staff obviously come back to us at the next finance
That
meeting.
is that they convert the current loan officer to a grant. That's basically what it's saying. No, you're seconding.
Seconded. And
councillors, will you please concentrate?
And Mr Mayor, and just for clarification, and part 2 would be that the staff obviously bring that back to a report on the funding source at the next finance meeting.
Okay, so you're on 10.6, page 178, Wingecarribee Adult Daycare Centre, request of loan facility. Move that option 3, that the current loan officer be, for the Wingecarribee Adult Daycare Centre, be converted to a grant with. Now you've been given the option in here, Councillor Scandrett, that it come from.
As you know, our rules of meeting practice require us to identify funding.
We are identifying the funding, and that is from the capital.
Well, then it should say that, sir. It should say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
So I just left it open so that they could advise that, but if they're saying capital reserve, fine.
Finance committee.
Mr Mayor, if you want to comment, my advice would be that we confirm the funding source. And I also just want to clarify, are you converting it to a $270,000 grant or a $220,000 grant?
220.
220. So they've got to pay us the $50,000 they've got in there?
Yes, that they received from that other source.
Right, well, the motion should reflect that it's 220,000.
220.
And it should also indicate that the funds come from the Capital Projects Reserve.
Capital Projects Reserve. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, so that's the recommendation, seconded by Councillor McLaughlin. Do we have an amendment?
We do have.
Councillor Whipper.
The amendment I'd like to move, Mr Mayor, is option 1. If I have a seconder. I'll second. Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Do we need to debate it, or do we... Okay, we've got Councillor Whipper and Councillor Andrews seconded the option 1 as an amendment. Okay, wait till we get that up on the board. And Councillor Scandred has moved option 3, identifying $220,000, and it come from the Capital Works Reserve. Right. Is there? We have gone over this a dozen times.
Mr Mayor, I just need to clarify one thing, if I may. I'm trying to stay out of the debate, obviously.
No, it's not a debate
well,
yet.
if the amendment was to be carried, my question would be: we're already well into the project. Yes. How am I going to finish the project if we haven't got the funding? So the project would have to stop. We've got a contract with a builder. Because effectively, once the work's done, we have to pay the builder in the contract, and if we're at a stalemate in terms of a loan agreement, then we're going to be back here again revisiting this with the exact same scenario.
Okay. Has everybody read the report?
Yeah. So I just need some guidance.
Okay. Everybody's read the report. Now, you happy with the amendment, Councillor Scandred? No, it was the... that's the motion. Sorry, Michelle. The amendment is the motion, and the motion is the amendment. Okay. So that's it. We've identified it. We're going to give them 220, and we'll go from there. Then I put. Is there a reason for the?
Can we speak to it?
The amendment's not up there.
Yeah, we're just doing
We're
that.
just
So
starting
you
it.
seconded the amendment.
Who seconded it?
I did.
That's fine.
Option 2 says we're not really going to chase the money. We don't know what it is.
Then let's see where it goes, Councillor. I would suggest perhaps Councillor Turland, you suggesting a foreshadowed motion. No, you're not to say that we will. Okay. Now, councillors, we're starting to keep focus, please.
Yep.
We've debated this a number of times. What's not right?
That's not right. Moved.
No, you don't.
We're right.
No.
Page 182, option 1.
You don't need item 1 in the motion. So if you put a 1 in the motion, take 1 out because that's they're in conflict. So that's the motion.
Well, that's going to be their problem. Things don't run over budget, Councillor Turland, you know that.
Yes, by this much, not by this much.
Doesn't matter, in the scheme of things, it's all the percentage. Don't know. Okay, have we got it up there? Yeah.
Well, we just need to check the amendment to make sure that reflects what's proposed.
Okay, now that's the amendment. Right. Now there we go. Okay. So I don't think there's. Councillor Turland has put in a foreshadowed motion. Right. No, I don't think there's any need for debate. We talked it to death. All in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand. Councillors Whipper, Halstead, Andrews, Nelson. All in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett, Markwart, McLaughlin and Gare. 4. I am using my casting vote.
Hang on.
Oh no, we haven't a foreshadowed motion. No, we don't. I have the right. I have the right to use my casting vote.
He doesn't vote, he votes in the negative.
That's right. It's a negative. Who didn't vote?
Who didn't vote? Councillor Turtle.
Put it to the vote again. Put it.
Then I will put the motion again. All in favour of the amendment, please, Madam General Manager. All in favour of the amendment, Councillors Nelson, Andrews, Whipper and Halstead. Those against, then in favour of the motion is Councillors Scandrett, Turlin, Markwart, McLaughlin and Gare. I declare
No, the amendment's lost.
the amendment is lost. I will now put the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Councillors Scandrett, Markwart, McLaughlin and Gare.
All against.
All against. Councillors Turlin, you're doing the same thing I did to you. Councillors, I shouldn't teach you. Councillors Turlin, Nelson, Andrews, Whipper and Halstead. I declare the motion lost. We now have a foreshadowed motion, which is option 2.
I'll second that.
We now put option 2. All in favour, we are not going to debate it. We are going. We have a mover and seconder, Councillors Turlin and McLaughlin. I'm going to put that as the motion. All in favour of that as the motion, please raise your hand. Councillors Turlin, Nelson, Markwart, McLaughlin and Gare. Those against. I declare the motion carried. Right.
Which was the first?
We move on to 10.7. And please, can I ask people not to interrupt the chair? I do happen to know sometimes what I'm doing, as Councillor Turlin just happened to know then, which I don't want to give him credit for, but he did well. 10.7, public exhibition of Nadai Punds floodplain. Put McLaughlin and Markwart, I put it. All in favour, those against carried. 11.1, turn off your light please, Councillor Turlin. 189, development applications determined. Move Nelson and Whipper. Is there any discussion? Hang on, I'll wait for the minute taker to catch up. Nelson and Whipper. I put it. All in favour, those against, carried. We move to 11.2, page 200, development applications received. Move Halstead and Markwart. You happy to move it, Councillor Halstead? Okay, and Councillor Markwart, page 200, 11.2.
Yes, we've got those.
Okay, any discussion? Nothing on received. I put it. All in favour. Those against, carried. We are over past 11.4. We're on to page 11.5. 11.3. What page is 11? Oh, I haven't. What page? I haven't got it in my... Oh, there it is. I had to get Lisa to mark it down. Draft Development Control Plan Amendments, 11.3, page 210. Somebody move. Councillor Turlin, are you moving?
No,
well, you've got your light on. Mover. Councillor Andrews, seconded Councillor Markwart. Councillor Turlin.
Look, if you read this recommendation, it relates to Berrima. But then when you go to page 211, it's all about Renwick. It's a bit confusing having page 1 only to do with one issue, then we had another issue on page 211, which is Renwick. Now, I understand the reason why it's in there, but then it all gets back to the attic rooms in the roof in relation to page 211. But then when you go to Council's page 231 and you look at Renwick's Village Square building, it's 2 stories, which then is contrary to what this DCP is actually saying. So Council says we can have our building 2-storey, but nobody else in Renwick can have 2-storey. It's there on page 231. But that's one of the concerns. But the concerns is at the front of the page here, it has got nothing to do with Renwick. It says Berrima. So I don't know why we've tied these two together. Sorry? Yeah, I don't know why they're tied together. I would like to remove the Renwick issue in this page and leave it as Berrima, and if it comes back with another bit about Renwick, it should be. But when you read or look at the document on the page that I said, it's got nothing to do with the front page.
Then,
210.
Councillor Turlin, can I just make the point? It is going out on exhibition.
I understand, but this is all to do with Berrima, but not Renwick. But there's Renwick documents in here making statements about Renwick. It's not, shouldn't be there.
Then I will ask a clarification from council staff, please. Councillor Turlin, resume your seat, please.
Get it wrong, you're in trouble.
Stannard. Now we've got 15 minutes or I am closing the meeting and we come back next Wednesday.
Okay, very quickly, what this report is doing is putting on exhibition 2 recently resolved amendments to the DCPs. So the first lot relate to the resolution for the planning proposals for Berrima, where it was resolved that we would also amend the Berrima Landscape Conservation Area parts of the Rural Lands DCP to include those items which are shown. The second matter emerged from confusion about what could and couldn't be done in Renwick. So they're two separate matters, but they'll be exhibited as the one set of DCP amendments. And they're being done this way to enable progress with the Berrima planning proposal and also to resolve what appeared to be a confusion with Renwick that we were trying to resolve. Now, at the same time, recent amendments to the DCP didn't clarify a couple of other elements, and so they've been included as well. So just to briefly address Mr Anstey, this is not the comprehensive DCP amendments that we were going to have the working group for. We're still waiting after 18 months for the department to put out its model DCP provisions so that we can work on those. These are just small amendments to facilitate understanding of the DCPs and to ensure we don't receive developments that aren't suitable for what we want.
Okay, so is that clarified, Councillor?
And actually, if you look on the computer, we've now got the word Renwick in the recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms Stannard. Okay, so you're happy enough now to... Who moved it initially? And Mark Ward. Any need for discussion now? Then I put the recommendation. All in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. We now move to page... we've finished at Aiken Road. So we're up to 11.5, request for fees assistance by Yappa Media for the Barrel Classic. Councillors?
Yep.
Councillor Turlin?
Yep, okay. I'll move as it was in 2017, I think a $3,000 contribution, and I'll just explain the reason why I say that.
No, please move the recommendation you're moving.
Which is what was in the 2017. And then I'll add to it if I can.
Contribution or donation?
And if I may, with the indulgence, I haven't got a second yet, but if I can take you to 293, page 293, it gives you a list of items, and I'd like those to be cut and paste in the system. And then I'll talk to that and explain my position, why I do that.
3,045.
Well, if you want to take it up, please, you can.
Okay, wait until it goes up.
You can cut and paste that anytime if they wish.
Councillors, can I ask that when you know you're going to move a recommendation, that you spend the time before the meeting, write out the recommendation so it can go up, and we're not waiting, getting the wording right or whatever. See Lisa and get it typed up so it's all done.
Okay. I can quickly talk to this, why that gets
Now
cut and
you
pasted.
wait a minute. You haven't got, so Michelle knows that the page 293 be cut and pasted.
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Turland, you have
Okay.
a seconded by Councillor
Now
Skegg.
let me explain to it. You know, I'm saying 3,000 on that page. It's $3,302. But if you take off the Heritage Park fee of $748 for 3 days, that's $2,244. So what I'm trying to say is that's just a fee to occupy the park. So that's $2,000 that we weren't going to get, we're not going to give either. The other 3 items, or 4 items there, which is the Section 68 and so on, and the casual hire and the velodrome and so on, that adds up to $1,058. So we're actually really only giving them $1,058 because we're granting him that free to use Heritage Park Road. So it's still a $3,000 that council would have received if we were charging all that, but in true terms we're really only giving $1,058. So I think if you can understand what I'm trying to explain to everybody there, it's not $3,000 cash. It's a waiving off the sorry? Understand? Okay, so let's leave it at that. I'm not going to go crazy. What I will say to you is Pie Time.
okay.
Pie Time, for instance, is funded by council, but all the vendors out at the Bong Bong picnic race and all around the different pubs and wineries, they all make money out of council's costing to set up Pie Time. Same with this. The vendors will be making money around the Shire, all the accommodation, food houses on the 2 days or the 3 days it's run.
Okay, thank you. I would like clarification from staff in relation to the comments made in what council's contribution is, please.
Well, I'm trying to understand what Councillor Turland's intent is. You mentioned that this isn't cash, right? But the way this is now worded, it is cash. So we need.
I'll correct it now for you.
All right, if you could,
well, it's really
a donation of $3,000 towards the cost of. Is that the way you would word it?
I mean, you're not going to write out a cheque at three.
No.
Well, that doesn't reflect.
No, I'm getting to it now. What I'm trying to say, that's what page 293 is, which is what I'm saying is our cash in kind dollars.
That is why it is so important to get these right before they go up.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Look, I understand where Councillor Turland's coming from, but I differ slightly in the sense that we are providing a service to Yaffa Media to use our facilities. That has a cost to provide that service. We cost that by setting fees and charges. The fees and charges that have been set for that are roughly $3,500. I'm not sure I've got the right page open there.
33.
So it's actually a cost to council for that. What we're now doing is we're going to put our hand in our pocket and hand $3,000 back. So we are actually incurring a cost. It will come out of the contingency fund. And what that does then, it also makes it transparent because it will be shown in our annual report as a donation to Yaffa Media. I mean, the alternative could be that you'd write the fees off. We haven't done that for a long time because that hides it, doesn't make it transparent, and it doesn't acknowledge the fact that it actually costs us to provide services, whether it be, in this case, the Yaffa Media or whatever it is. So the bottom line is, I guess, is I sort of agree with you that there's 3,000 coming in and 3,000 going out, but we incur a cost to provide that service. for $3,000. So at the end of the day, it's costing council $3,000. So I'm going to differ slightly with what you've said.
But I think you're all in a furious agreement. But could we get the wording right? And I think the wording...
I think it's spot on.
All right, but it doesn't say it's towards these costs. It sounds to me like we'd give them $3,000, the way it reads at the moment.
Semantics. I mean, they have...
They've got to give it back to us.
Okay, all right.
We're going to give it to them, and they're going to pay it back.
Well, yes,
$300 more.
we get traffic management, we get waste collection, whatever. Okay, is council happy with this? Because there was a resolution passed that everything is one-off. Now, this is going to come back next year, councillors, because it's obviously a very successful operation. That
Mr. Mayor,
there is money made. We've got 5 minutes. Councillor Scandrett.
Very
No, I
briefly,
mean
Mr.
it.
Mayor,
I'm wrapping it up.
Next year, Mr. Mayor, this would come, in my view, would come back to our Tourism Economic Development Officer, because it would fall under the criteria I would see as him. No, just hear me out, please, Mr. Mooney. In my view, that this is an event where we are supporting events. There should be a budget at his disposal for that. Takes it out of this arena, takes it out of the contingency.
Put in a notice of motion to go to the Finance Committee for discussion. Councillor Marple.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to basically oppose this. Basically, I'll quickly touch on the point that Councillor Turlin said that vendors make money out of this. They do. That's all good. So vendors should pay for this. They should support this service by contributing, not the ratepayer, not the average ratepayer. That's right. I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, no, I oppose that. I support Councillor Turlin. I oppose that, and there's a number of reasons. I asked the staff to give me information. I've got 10 items here that support why we should give the funding. I won't go into them. I'll support the motion.
Okay, I'll put the recommendation. All in favour as moved by Councillor Turlin and Scandrett. Please raise your hand. Councillors Nelson, Turlin, Scandrett, Halstead, McLaughlin and Gare against. Oh, it's not a planning matter, so the other 3. Okay, 11.6. Move Councillor Whipper, seconded Councillor Nelson. That's appointment of community representatives. Put it. All in favour. Those against carried. 14.1. Response to development applications. Mark Wharton Whipper, page 298. Put it. All in favour. Against carried. 15.1. Minutes of Arts and Culture Advisory Committee. Moved Whipper and Halstead. Put it. All in favour. Those against carried. We move to 15.2. Minutes of Sport and Rec. Moved Andrews and Nelson. Any discussion? Put it. Page 310, that is. All in favour, against, carried. We move to page 15.3, minutes of the audit risk and improvement. Moved Nelson, seconded Mark Ward.
And we're not catching who is moving and seconding. So could we just give Michelle a moment?
Mark Wharton Nelson.
Is this for the
We've got.
Committee?
Audit Committee was Nelson and Mark Wharton. Andrews was reckoned Sport and Rec. And who seconded? I got it. And then it was Whipper and Halstead for Arts and Culture. Right? We caught up? Okay. 16.1, questions with notice. Can we ask that they be deferred until next month? Will you move?
Please, yep.
Moved Councillor Turlin, seconded Councillor Halstead, that 16.1 be deferred. 16.2 be deferred. Same way, moved and seconder. 16.3 to the next meeting. Same way, Turland and Mark Ward. Put that. All in favour, please say aye. Against. We have no closed meeting. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you, ball boys. Thank you, umpires. Thank you, members of the